65. The young sword cultivator from the Wind Thunder Garden was in high spirits when he saw the young girl. The first thing he said to Ning Yarrow was, "Little girl, if you were a little older, you would definitely not be inferior to my fairy Sue." This was probably the highest evaluation the young sword cultivator could give to a woman in the world. Of course, Ning Yarrow's expression did not look too good. However, before she could say anything, Liu Baqiao, who could speak the dialect of the small town, had already turned his head and gave Chen Pinggan a thumbs up. The genius sword cultivator from the Wind Thunder Garden said with clear eyes, "You dare to challenge the mountain guardian ape of Xingyang Mountain with a mortal body. Most importantly, you survived. It's simply a miracle." Liu Baqiao was really curious. How did this youth in straw sandals with thin arms and legs in front of him cultivate such astonishing explosive power? Liu Baqiao withdrew his thumb. He did not walk side by side with Chen Pinggan and Chen Songfeng, who were walking in front. Instead, he walked beside Chen Pinggan. He turned his head and said with a smile, "Although Xingyang Mountain is just a small hill with some cowards who don't live up to their name, the mountain guardian ape is famous for its fierceness. Its reputation was earned through punches. Especially after the death of the founding ancestor of Xingyang Mountain, in the first 200 years before Xingyang Mountain opened the third peak, it was almost all thanks to this old ape that Xingyang Mountain was not annexed by the surrounding forces. Of course, at that time, Xingyang Mountain was just a small sect that did not have much influence. The enemies it had to face were not too strong. If they had provoked our Wind Thunder Garden at that time, there was no suspense. As long as the ancestor gave the order to reward me with a sword manipulation card, I could run to the sky above Xingyang Mountain alone and gently throw down our Thunder Pool sword formation. After this rain of swords, Xingyang Mountain would be finished." Liu Baqiao made a gesture of casually throwing something on the ground. Ning Yarrow mercilessly exposed him. "Xingyang Mountain is not as weak as you say. The Wind Thunder Garden is also not as powerful as you say." Liu Baqiao did not show any signs of awkwardness. He changed the topic at lightning speed and said mysteriously to Chen Pinggan, "I heard that the predecessor of this covered bridge was a stone arch bridge. Under the stone arch bridge, there was a rusty old sword hanging to prevent the dragon from running into water. Generally speaking, this kind of unremarkable old thing is definitely not an ordinary item. Perhaps it is a spiritual treasure that can shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep." Liu Baqiao stomped his feet on the wooden corridor and said, "But I just laid on the ground and used my hands to knock for a long time, but I didn't find any clues. Could it be that this thing is not fated with me? Logically speaking, it shouldn't be possible. For a rare genius in the way of the sword like me, if that old sword was really a divine weapon, it should have resonated with me, right? Could it be that the old sword was just an old object that had been around for a long time? Alas, what a pity, what a pity." Chen Pinggan next to him was a little stunned. This guy did not seem to be joking at all. He was very serious. Although it had nothing to do with reason and evidence, one could not say that he was purely talking nonsense. Liu Baqiao did not care whether Chen Pinggan was annoyed or not. He just talked about the interesting stories in the small town. He said that so-and-so got an eye-catching fated chance and pulled the whole iron chain of the dragon-locking well out of the deep well. He also said that so-and-so wandered for a few days but did not find the fated chance. In the end, in a dilapidated alley, he casually looked up and found that there was a small bronze mirror embedded in the wall above the door. That person climbed up the ladder to take a look. Oh my, it was actually the ancestor in the demon-revealing mirror. The cloud and thunder arcs were engraved with 8 small words: "The light of the sun and the moon, the world is bright." That brother was so happy that he stood on the ladder and cried loudly. There was also a young lady from the Oceantide Cavalry who profited from misfortune and got to know young Master Kui from the Lakeview Academy. The two of them hit it off at first sight. After crossing the corridor, Chen Pinggan and Chen Songfeng naturally slowed down and let Chen Pinggan lead the way. The group of people walked upstream along the nameless stream. Chen Pinggan carried a large basket with yellowish bamboo leaves on his back. Chen Songfeng carried a bamboo box that was still green and lovely. Liu Baqiao was very curious about what was in Chen Pinggan's basket and insisted on finding out, so he told Chen Pinggan to slow down. As he followed Chen Pinggan, He rummaged through the basket and found quite a lot of things in a mess. There were 3 bamboo hats stacked on top of each other, 2 pots, 1 kettle, 1 filled with oil, 2 large and small hatchets, 2 pieces of flint, and a bundle of matches. At the bottom of the basket, there was also a row of bamboo tubes that had been cut in half and then closed together. There were about 7 or 8 sections of bamboo tubes, and a small cloth bag filled with fishing hooks and fishing lines. Liu Baqiao asked, Chen Pinggan, what are those sections of bamboo tubes for? Chen Pinggan answered, there are a total of 8 bamboo tubes. 6 of them have 4 rice balls in each tube. The other 2 have some pickles that won't spoil easily. Liu Baqiao's face was full of pride. His steps were a little light as he said loudly, pickles, I've eaten them before. Chen Pinggan glanced at him strangely. Was it that great to have eaten pickles? Unless you could eat an entire bamboo tube of pickles without drinking water or rice, that would be amazing. Liu Baqiao suddenly asked curiously, on this trip into the mountains, we'll at most have 3 meals. Do we need 2 bamboo tubes of pickles? With pickles, I can eat half a bowl of rice with just a little bit of chopsticks. Chen Pinggan was thinking about which mountain path was the fastest. He said casually, Miss Ning and I will eat from 1 tube of pickles. You and your 2 friends can eat together. Liu Baqiao was stunned. He laughed softly and said, don't be so polite. I'll eat from 1 tube with you. Ning Yarrow said resolutely, no. You eat with your friends. Liu Baqiao said angrily, why? Ning Yarrow raised her chin, indicating that the answer was with Chen Pinggan. She meant that she couldn't be bothered to talk to Liu Baqiao. Liu Baqiao shifted his gaze. There was a hint of resentment in his eyes, but there was also a hint of anticipation. Chen Pinggan smiled and shook his head. Liu Baqiao sighed helplessly, I can understand that you value women over friends. Ning Yarrow said sarcastically, you became friends so quickly. Then you must have at least a few thousand friends, if not tens of thousands, right? Liu Baqiao stared, how is that possible? Ning Yarrow raised her eyebrows and added, how can there be so few? Liu Baqiao clicked his tongue, Miss Ning, your personality is not as good as my fairy Sue's. Ning Yarrow frowned, is it Zhengyang Mountain's Su Jiao? Liu Baqiao became even more proud, yes, Su Jiao, he Jisho, was actually a Jiao. As the sage said, good farmers are numerous. How is it? My fairy Sue's name is also very moving, isn't it? Ning Yarrow asked a question that Chen Pinggan would definitely not understand. If you really like Su Jiao so much, then have you ever thought about what would happen if she also likes you? Liu Baqiao was immediately deflated. He stammered and finally muttered to himself guiltily, how could she possibly like me? Chen Pinggan felt that Liu Baqiao was not a bad person. Chen Dui and Chen Songfeng distanced themselves from the 3 people in front of them by more than 10 steps. Seeing that Liu Baqiao and the straw sandal youth were getting along so well, Chen Songfeng was a little envious. Liu Baqiao seemed to be born to be good at interacting with people. There were all kinds of people, emperors, generals, and servants. There was no one he couldn't chat with. Chen Songfeng asked in a low voice, after that woman heard the news, she immediately visited the Yamen and offered to return the armor as an apology from the Shu family of Clearwind City. Why didn't you accept it? Chen Dui was obviously much more amiable than before she entered the town. If Chen Songfeng asked this question in the past, she would have ignored it and explained patiently, if the Clearwind City knew the truth and the youth's ancestor was the tombkeeper of the Chen family of Clearwind City, then they would have to pay a price for daring to do such a thing, and it would not be as simple as returning the armor. However, since they did not know the inside story, the Great Path's opportunity is precious and everyone can fight for it. The Chen family of Clearwind City would not be so overbearing. Chen Songfeng said with a smile, maybe Clearbreeze City also had the intention to scheme against Zhengyang Mountain. If it wasn't for the old ape charging at the front and being used by the woman as a banner, Clearbreeze City probably wouldn't have been able to take the armor away. Chen Dui returned to her original appearance and sneered, they only know how to go with the flow and never care about what the real general trend is. Chen Songfeng lowered her voice and said casually, maybe they have the heart but not the strength. Instead of doing something futile, they might as well get some small benefits. Chen Dui turned her head and glanced at the disciple of the Chen family of Dragontail County. Chen Dui did not comment on Chen Songfeng's unintentional words. They were about to enter the mountain. Chen Pinggan stopped and Chen Dui said almost at the same time, Liu Baqiao, tell him to just lead the way, the faster the better. Liu Baqiao had watched most of the battle between the straw sandal youth and the mountain-moving ape on the roof of the town from afar. When he returned, he told Chen Songfeng about it. Chen Dui was also there, so she knew that she could not treat Chen Pinggan as an ordinary youth. Therefore, in the end, Chen Songfeng was the one who dragged them down. Although this prodigy of a tycoon also liked to climb mountains, write poems, and explore the unknown, he paled in comparison to the other four. Chen Dui was a martial arts expert. Liu Baqiao was a swordsman who focused on tempering the body among all the qi refinement warriors in the world. The young man and young lady could even toy with a mountain-moving ape with an extremely strong body. The mountain path was difficult to traverse. Especially after the spring rain, the ground was muddy and slippery. Coupled with the fact that they had to cross streams and stone cliffs from time to time, Chen Songfeng's mouth was dry and she was sweating profusely. Later on, even when Liu Baqiao helped Chen Songfeng to carry the school box, Chen Songfeng was still panting and her face was pale. During this period, Chen Pinggan asked Chen Dui once if they should slow down. Chen Dui's reply was to shake her head. When the group of people needed to wade through the stream, Chen Songfeng stepped on a rock with moss growing on it. He slipped and fell into the stream, becoming a drowned rat. He was in an extremely sorry state. Chen Dui stopped and turned around. Although she did not say anything, her face was gloomy. Liu Baqiao quickly turned around to help Chen Songfeng up. Chen Songfeng said apologetically, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I can definitely keep up. Chen Pinggan simply took off the basket and placed it in the depression of the cliff. He said, he'll be fine after resting for 15 minutes. Of course, Ning Yao did not mind. She squatted near Chen Pinggan. Bored to death, she placed her palms on the hilt of her saber and sword respectively. She pressed down gently. The ends of the scabbard gently knocked on the green cliff. The sound was in harmony with the sound of the stream. Chen Dui said in a low voice, let's continue. Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, don't use all your strength in one go. Let's rest for a while before continuing. When he gradually gets used to it, he can keep up with us. It's not that he's physically weak, it's just that his breathing is chaotic. Chen Pinggan was indeed an expert when it came to climbing mountains and wading through rivers. Unexpectedly, Chen Dui did not listen to Chen Pinggan's explanation at all. He directly said to Chen Songfeng, just go back to the town. Chen Songfeng's face was full of bitterness. He looked at the unquestionable young woman and turned to Liu Baqiao. He said, then I'll have to trouble you to carry the book box. Liu Baqiao was furious. He took the book box and threw it at Chen Dui. I'm not going to serve you. Chen Dui's face was calm. He took the book box and carried it himself. He said to Chen Pinggan, let's go. Chen Pinggan thought for a moment. He took out 2 bamboo tubes from the basket and gently tossed them to Liu Baqiao. If you're hungry on the way back, you can fill your stomach. Chen Songfeng softly persuaded Liu Baqiao. The latter held the bamboo tubes and sneered. I'm not going to endure this. I'll go back with you. When we get to the yamen, we'll have a table of good wine and good food. Isn't it more comfortable than this? Chen Dui turned and continued walking. After Chen Pinggan carried the basket, he was somewhat worried. He looked at Liu Baqiao and asked, do you know the way back? Liu Baqiao smiled. I remember. Chen Pinggan nodded and left with Ning Yao. The figures of the 3 people in front of them gradually disappeared. Chen Songfeng simply sat down on a rock and smiled bitterly. Why did you do this? It's not a bad thing for you and the Wind Thunder Garden to have some ties with the Chen family in Yingyan. Why did you let your emotions affect your decisions? Liu Baqiao opened a bamboo tube and revealed a snow-white rice ball. He happily said, Chen Pinggan is still the most honest. He's worthy of being my good brother. Chen Songfeng knew Liu Baqiao's temper and did not try to persuade him anymore. Chen Songfeng said self-deprecatingly, "He's a useless scholar." Liu Baqiao muttered, "If I'd known, I would have asked Chen Pinggan to leave a bamboo tube of pickled vegetables." He grabbed a rice ball and gnawed on it. He said vaguely, "You're wrong. The town's Mr. Qi, and of course, Mr. Qi's teacher, are very powerful." Chen Songfeng's eyes were absent-minded. "What do you think Mr. Qi wants to do?" Liu Baqiao answered casually, "God knows." Chen Songfeng reached out and shook his soaked clothes. He sighed. "What a God knows." In the shop by the stream, Liu Xianyang fell asleep again. Ruan Teng sat at the head of the bed with a dignified expression. Every breath of the tall teenager was long and distant. The key was that the breath he exhaled was like the mist in the mountains and the smoke on the lake. It was white and misty. It did not scatter with the wind, but condensed in the mouth and nose bit by bit. In the end, there was a 3-inch-long white dragon entrenched on the teenager's face. He used the dream as a sword furnace. He made the immortal sword in one go. Ruan Teng rubbed his chin and praised, "It turns out that he took the extreme path of breaking and then building. All the aperture acupoints were broken and there was no obstruction. Although this body is completely rotten, this sword is finally completed. It can be used to forge and practice swords. No wonder this sword manual is so popular. It can be used to cultivate in sleep and in dreams. There is hope." Ruan Ting stood up and said self-deprecatingly, "I shouldn't have agreed to lend you to the Chen family of Yingyan for 20 years. The 3 carriages went up the seemingly endless mountain road. They finally reached the top. Song Jisin and Ji Qiu got off the carriage and looked at each other. The top of the mountain was a large flat platform with 2 stone pillars in the center. However, the pillars flowed like water, and the scene behind the water could not be seen clearly. It was as if there was a gate in front of the boy and girl. The girl stared at the gate. Song Jisin turned around and walked to the edge of the mountain. He looked into the distance and felt refreshed by the beautiful rivers and mountains. Song Jianqiang, the vassal of Dali, was wrapped in a fox fur coat. His face was pale but he was in good spirits. He came to Song Jisin's side and said with a smile, "This is the Pearl Grotto Heaven in the eastern vast continent. It is one of the 36 small grotto heavens. It is not known for its vast area. Its territory is only about 1,000 miles. Song Jianqiang did not turn his head. He just raised his hand and pointed at the gate behind him. After passing through that gate and going down the ladder, about 30 miles later, you will be stepping on the territory of Dali. At that time, you may not be able to see anything clearly even if you turn your head. However, you can understand one thing. That is, this Pearl Grotto Heaven is actually hanging high in the sky." Song Jianqiang paused for a moment. "A pearl." 66. Song Jisin stood at the top of the mountain and had a broad view. After staying in Mud Bottle Lane for so many years, he could only see mud walls as far as the eye could see. The teenager liked the feeling of being able to see thousands of miles of mountains and rivers under his feet. Song Jianqiang adjusted his expensive but old fox fur coat. This vassal king was surprisingly in high spirits today. He pointed to a high mountain in the west and said, "That mountain is called Mount Biyun. In the future, it may be conferred by Dali as one of the 10 main mountains outside of the 5 sacred mountains. According to the old rules left by our ancestors, there will be a mountain god who will be recorded at the top of the genealogical records. He will be able to create a golden statue and enjoy the incense of the human world. He will suppress the fate of Dali and will not be scattered to other places to prevent the neighboring countries from making a wedding dress. The people of the town can only see the Longchu mountain under our feet when they stand at the top of Mount Biyun. Because the Longchu mountain is protected by a large array, ordinary people can't see the scenery here with the naked eye. This is also an opportunity. According to the records of the government office, there are several people in history who have climbed the Longchu mountain and successfully walked out of this world." Song Jisin asked, "Then, are these people all outstanding now? In our Dali or Eastern Bottle continent, they have become the top people?" Song Jianqiang smiled and said, "2 of them are doing well in Dali. They are separated by less than 30 years. One of them is a scholar and the other is a martial artist. They are known as the twin jade annulus of Dali. The one who is a scholar was promoted to a scholar after his death, and the one who is a martial artist won a lot of ancestral glory for his descendants. Although I have a very bad impression of the two's descendants, the two families have a close relationship with Dali. I have to pinch my nose and admit it. After all, if it weren't for their joint efforts to turn the tide, the Song clan wouldn't have survived that crisis. Song Jisin felt the breeze on the top of the mountain and had a feeling of ascension. He asked, "What about the others?" Song Jianqiang gently exhaled and felt more refreshed. He suppressed the rising sea of qi in his body as if he was using one hand to forcibly suppress a rising sun. At this moment, Song Jianqiang was very sure that as long as he stepped out of the door, he would immediately reach the 10th realm, which was known as the peak of martial art. All the qi refinement warriors below the upper 5 realms had almost no chance of winning against an ultimate grandmaster who had reached the peak of martial arts. They would only be crushed and killed. Song Jianqiang calmed his state of mind and told the young man the truth that was not too heartwarming. All of them are dead. This king once killed one with his own hands. At the time, this king was only a warrior of the 7th realm, and that person was a relatively troublesome sword cultivator who was at the peak of his life. That time, this king and this king pursued each other for 700 to 800 li. In the end, this king finally caught up to him at a small place called White Fox Pass on the southern border of Great Li. After destroying all of his magical artifacts and life-bound flying swords, this king wrung his neck. There was no choice. This was the only outcome for those who refused to be used by Dali. It is true that the Song family has always treated the qi cultivators well. However, the prerequisite is that these qi cultivators must work hard for the Song family, even if it is just for show. During the second half of that battle, Song Jianqiang entered the 8th realm. Song Jisin was not interested in the legendary experience of this vassal king uncle. He only asked curiously, "Is it because the other dynasties offered a higher price? That is why they did not hesitate to betray Dali?" Song Jianqiang smiled and said, "Most of the time, this was the case before that swordsman. The Great Li dynasty is located in a remote area and its people are tough. It is a country that worships martial arts. Martial arts geniuses come in large numbers and they are not worth much. However, qi cultivators who are gentle and soft are rare. Therefore, every time a few of them appear, the previous emperors of the Great Li dynasty would worship them like bodhisattvas. The current emperor, that is my brother, of course, is no exception. There was one time when that sword cultivator entered the palace to meet my brother. He walked with his sword on his back and his nose in the air, looking very annoying. At that time, he happened to be lucky enough to obtain a suitable amulet treasure. Everyone in the court was at the peak of their power. Therefore, after seeing me, he did not even greet me." Song Jisin asked, "And then?" Song Jianqiang cast a sideways glance at his nephew as if he was looking at an idiot. "And then didn't he die?" Song Jisin's face was full of disbelief. "Uncle, just because he did not greet you, you killed a great cultivator who could be called a pillar of the country?" Song Jianqiang said indifferently, "There are some people that you can't spoil." Song Jisin's eyes were filled with suspicion. He did not seem to understand how such an arrogant and unruly member of the Dali royal family could survive until today. Song Jianqiang smiled and said, "You may not know one thing. That is, in the entire Eastern Treasure Island, there is only one dynasty's qi cultivators. No matter what background they have to go to the border battlefield to work hard for the emperor. They have to fight for 3 years. If they do not have enough military achievements, they will continue to stay at the border until they have accumulated enough before they can return home to enjoy life." Song Jisin was even more puzzled. "Uncle, didn't you say that Dali worships qi cultivators the most? Why is there such a rule? Taking a step back, isn't Dali afraid that these people will die prematurely on the battlefield?" Song Jianqiang laughed and said, "This unwritten rule was established after I took control of the military power." Song Jisin suddenly understood and said, "Is it because that swordsman is unwilling to go to the battlefield and embarrass you, causing the other qi cultivators to follow suit and subconsciously damage the morale of Dali's army and the people? So, you can only choose the lesser of two evils." Song Jianqiang shook his head and said, "That swordsman joined the army at the border when he was young. In just 1 year, he accumulated enough military achievements and has a good reputation in Delhi. Song Jisin flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "Then what is the reason? Could it be that he was jealous of you, violated the taboo of the Song clan, or secretly colluded with the enemy and committed treason?" Song Jankyung's answer was very simple. Although cultivators and martial artists are people of two different paths, the former is indeed more, well, in the words of that embroidered tiger, more golden branches and jade leaves. If we were to pick the most outstanding people out of the two, the chi cultivators of the upper 5 realms would be like standing at the top of the mountain here. For a martial artist like me, I can only stand at the top of that Mount Biyun. Of course, it is not impossible for a martial artist of the upper 5 realms to fight with a cultivator of the upper 5 realms. But ultimately, in the eyes of the secular world, a martial artist is a big fellow who only knows how to fight and kill. He is inferior to other cultivators. So when we met in the palace that time, although he did not greet me, he deliberately glanced at me from the corner of his eyes and curled his lips. It was very provocative. I wanted to teach him how to behave. Song Jisin was dumbstruck. If you want to teach him how to behave, you should at least leave him a way out. Do you have to break his neck? Song Jankyung did not want to talk about the dead man. Do you really want to know about the middle-aged man who fought with me to the death? Song Jisin subconsciously swallowed his saliva and did not speak. Although the 3 carriages had left first, the 2 people at the back were fighting head-on. Once, Song Jankyung fell from the sky and smashed a big hole in the ground a few 100 feet away from the carriage. After that, Song Jankyung retaliated. At that time, the youth had already climbed to the roof of the carriage and saw with his own eyes that the burly man with an aura like a dragon on land was smashed into a small hill by Song Jankyung. The splashing of dust was extremely spectacular. Inhuman. This was the only impression the youth had at that time. In fact, the fight between Song Jankyung and the burly man was not ethereal at all. It was as if every punch was hitting flesh. From the beginning to the end, it was as if they were exchanging injury for injury, life for life. It was a competition of who was more unreasonable. Song Jankyung suddenly rubbed the youth's head. His voice and tone were unusually warm. "My brother is very ambitious." When the emperor of the Great Sway Kingdom was only focused on Delhi, he had already set his sights on the old dragon city in the southernmost part of the eastern bottle continent. Don't you find it strange that I, a prince of Delhi and a vassal who controls the military power of a country, have such high prestige in the military and among the people that no one can compare to, can still be so respectful to your father? Song Jisin smiled and said slyly, "Uncle, if you are willing to say it, just say it." Song Jankyung retracted his hand and said in a deep voice, "Because the only thing I want is to see the martial arts scene beyond the boundary. Only when I reach there, I, Song Jankyung, will not have lived in vain." At this moment, the youth's heart seemed to be surging with a torrent. He asked in a trembling voice, "If I were to focus wholeheartedly, would I be able to reach the heights that you are at today?" Song Jankyung shook his head and smiled. "If you were to practice martial arts, you would only reach the 8th realm at most. There would be no future. It would be better for you to be a chi refinement warrior obediently. Your achievements would definitely be higher." Song Jisin was a little unconvinced. "Why can I only reach the 8th realm of martial arts?" Song Jankyung smiled playfully. "Only?" Song Jisin blushed a little. Song Jankyung did not care about the youth's ignorance. He squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. He said slowly, "Chi refinement warriors are a profession that relies on the heavens to make a living. It is very important to have a good life. Today, you will encounter an opportunity here. Tomorrow, you will pick up a Dharma treasure somewhere. The day after tomorrow, you will accidentally meet a hidden immortal. The day after tomorrow, you will be enlightened just by looking at the scenery. It seems that you can increase your cultivation level no matter what you do. As for us martial artists, it is very different. There are no shortcuts to be taken. We can only rely on taking one step at a time. It is very boring." Song Jisin had mixed feelings. He was a little disappointed. Song Jankyung ignored this nephew of his. He turned and walked towards the horse carriage. When he saw the back view of the young girl from the corner of his eye, He hesitated for a moment. He walked to her side and raised his head to look at the door with her. Song Jianqiang muttered to himself, "The chi of the true dragon condenses into pearls. All the flood dragons in the world regard pearls as precious. It is like a cultivator's natal primordial spirit." The maidservant Jiqiu did not turn her head, but showed a trace of nervousness. Song Jianqiang smiled and said, "In order to write the words wind generates water rises on the plaque of the covered bridge, I, Dali, have paid a great price that outsiders cannot imagine. Wind generates water rises, why water rises? Isn't it because when the flood dragon crosses the river, it will be unimpeded? As for this prince, I don't care about these things. Everything is just the wish of your young master's heartless father. After you leave this small cave, I reckon that other than that embroidered tiger in the capital, no one else will be able to order you around." Song Jianqiang turned his head and looked at the side of the young girl's face. "Although your fate is linked to that of this prince's nephew, and you share honor and disgrace, you shouldn't be too arrogant. Don't let this prince have the thought of making a move. For the sake of Dallas Jiangshan and nephew Song Jisin's face, this prince can make an exception and give you 2 chances to court death. It just happens to fulfill the old saying no more than 3. The young girl suddenly became angry. She first turned around and then took 2 steps back. She fiercely stared at this Dali vassal who made her feel fear. "I am not a human, but you want to restrict me with the rules of the human world. Who is the unreasonable one? Your golden rules and regulations, what does it have to do with me?" Song Jianqiang smiled happily and said, "Don't get me wrong, this prince will never ask you for small things. On the contrary, this prince is your biggest protective talisman." Song Jianqiang stared at the young girl. She had a pair of strange golden eyes. He finally said, "After that fight, this prince and you are actually allies in the same boat. Remember this sentence, especially in the future, when you are qualified to make important decisions, remember this sentence." Song Jianqiang turned and left. Next to the carriage, a middle-aged coachman with a rough smell of the battlefield looked at the eye-catching snow-white fox fur coat on the Dali vassal. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "Prince, when will you change to a new fox fur coat? It's been so many years. Prince is not tired of wearing it, but we are tired of looking at it." Song Jianqiang boarded the carriage, bent over to lift the curtain, and said in a bad mood, "Let's talk about it after we defeat the Great Sui Kingdom." The coachman who was driving the carriage laughed heartily. Facing the powerful vassal of Dali, he was not restrained at all. Song Jianqiang had been in the military for 20 years. Although he was a general and commander, it was impossible for him to take the lead in every battle. He was more likely to strategize in the tent. However, when there was smoke everywhere on the border of Dali, Song Jianqiang must be personally involved in every battle. As a vassal, he had never drunk wine or had beautiful women in his daily life. It could almost be described as having nothing but possessions. After Song Jianqiang got into the carriage, he sat cross-legged and frowned. "That person asked me not to rush to the capital after leaving Lizhu Cave. He said that I might as well wait at the foot of the mountain and look up. What should I wait for? What should I look at?" Song Jisin and the maidservant Jiqiu also got into the carriage. The carriage was ready to go through the gate. Song Jisin found Jiqiu curled up in the corner, shivering. He asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" Jiqiu said in a trembling voice, "I can feel that there are countless terrible things on the other side of the gate." Song Jisin smiled and comforted her, "My uncle is here. What are you afraid of? Don't be afraid. Even if the sky falls, he can hold it up." Unexpectedly, Jiqiu became more and more panicked. She curled up in the corner and cried, "Even he can't hold it up." A rare guest came to the town's largest restaurant. A white-haired teacher ordered a jug of wine and a few dishes to go with the wine. He drank by himself and enjoyed the food. It turned out that the teacher did not teach today. The students went home happily one by one. When he finished the last cup of wine and the last bite of food, he gently put down his chopsticks. After the sound of a slap, the small grotto heaven of thousands of miles was silent. Everything was still. The heaven and earth instantly collapsed. At this moment, the immortals on the mountain and the mortals at the foot of the mountain could not help but look up. But in the next moment, it was as if there was an immortal who was even more powerful than immortals. He used a great divine power to change the heaven and earth, covering the entire Pearl Grotto heaven. In the sky above the northern part of the eastern bottle continent, thousands of miles of clouds rolled and slowly lowered. There was a person who was completely white. His sleeves were fluttering, and he seemed to be thousands of feet tall. He sat upright, and a broken pearl the size of his palm floated in front of him. This person's Dharma form was so huge that it was as if he had turned the entire eastern bottle continent into a private school. Above the boundless sea of clouds, awe-inspiring voices exploded like heavenly thunder one after another. "Qi Jing Chun, how dare you? Disgraceful! Repent and be saved!" The scholar lowered his head and stared at the pearl. He slowly retracted his gaze and finally raised his head. "I, Qi Jing Chun, will shoulder the counterattack of the heavenly Tao that the town has accumulated for 3,000 years. 67. 2 days before Qi Jing Chun put down the pair of chopsticks, there were some bad signs in the small town. The water level in the Iron Lock well dropped drastically, the locust tree branches broke off from the tree trunks, and the branches and leaves were all yellow and withered. It was obviously not in line with the rules of spring flourishing and autumn withering. There were also many places outside the small town where there were many wooden and clay statues. There were often firecracker-like explosions in the middle of the night. Busybodies went to take a look and found that more than half of the clay bodhisattvas and wooden deities that were still around last winter had disappeared. The ox and horse carriages that set off from Fulu Street and Peachleaf Alley never stopped. Even in the middle of the night, one could hear the hooves of the ox and horse that disturbed one's sleep on the streets paved with large bluestone slabs. Those foreigners who were dressed in luxurious clothes and exuded an air of wealth also began to walk out hurriedly. Most of them looked unhappy and were in groups of 2 or 3. There were often people who pointed in the direction of the school in the small town and were quite angry. Zheng Dafeng, the bachelor at the east gate of the small town, was nowhere to be seen. The Bureau of Kill Affairs also had no intention of finding someone to replace him. Therefore, the small town was like a person who had lost 2 front teeth. Liu Baqiao and Chen Songfeng returned along the original path. When the 2 of them could see the outline of the covered bridge, it was already dusk. Liu Baqiao walked along a small path to the stream and squatted down to wash his face. Perhaps he felt that it was not satisfying enough, so he raised his buttocks and lay on the ground, sinking his entire head into the stream. Finally, he suddenly raised his head and exclaimed in joy. Turning his head to look at Chen Songfeng, who was sweating profusely, Liu Baqiao joked, "A weak scholar who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken." Chen Songfeng only scooped some water and drank a mouthful of the stream. He said with a hoarse voice, "The reason why I worked so hard to become a qi cultivator was because I wanted to strengthen my body, live a few more years, and read a few more books. How can I compare to you sword cultivators? Moreover, in this small grotto heaven, qi cultivators who are not sword cultivators are the most disadvantaged. If you are not careful, you will lose your cultivation. The higher the realm, the more you will lose. I never thought that my low cultivation would be a good thing." Liu Baqiao patted his shoulder. "Why don't you change your sect and join our Wind and Thunder Garden to practice swordsmanship? I will protect you in the future. Think about it, becoming a sword cultivator, riding a sword in the wind, flying high in the sky, as fast as lightning. Especially during a thunderstorm, riding on a sword to travel back and forth." Chen Songfeng suddenly smiled and said, "I heard that the sword practitioner who was struck by lightning the most times in the Wind Thunder Garden is called." Liu Baqiao stretched out a hand. "Stop." Swordsman was also one of the qi refinement warriors. However, compared to ordinary qi refinement warriors, their physique was closer to that of a pure martial artist. To put it simply, it was the muscles, bones, and essence. Swordsmen pursued both. For other qi refinement warriors, as long as their physique did not drag them down, they did not deliberately temper their physique. Of course, while qi refinement warriors nurtured and refined their qi, they perfected their physique, just like the spring wind and rain. They were constantly tempering themselves. However, compared to swordsmen, in terms of tempering one's physique, be it in terms of strength or frequency, they were far inferior. It was also impossible for them to be as dedicated and tireless as martial artists. To the Qi refinement warriors of the world, there was a consensus that the body was something that was constantly decaying. It was fine as long as it was sufficient. It would be best if one was lucky enough to cultivate the invincible Vajra body or the stainless glass body. However, it did not matter if one was not able to cultivate it. One must not be stubborn and miss the root of Tao. Liu Baqiao asked casually, "That distant relative of yours, what level of martial artist is he?" Chen Songfeng said helplessly, "How would I know such confidential information?" Liu Baqiao recalled the conflict that broke out in the main hall of the Yamen that day. He sighed and said, "Song Jianqiang is really too strong. The most frightening thing is that this vassal of Dali is still so young. Ordinary 8th and 9th realm martial artists are all above 50 or 60 years old. Even 100 years old is not considered old. However, if I remember correctly, Song Jianqiang is only close to 40 years old. No wonder that person jokingly said that he needed to suppress his arrogance back then." Chen Songfeng said softly, "He was born with the times and is blessed by the heavens." Upper 5 realms cultivators were elusive and difficult to find. However, the 8th and 9th realms among martial artists were often known by the world. They were not far from the secular dynasties. Moreover, the advancement of martial arts relied on one life and death battle after another. Only by being on the line between life and death and seeing life and death could one break through life and death and obtain a transcendent state of mind similar to Buddhism's freedom and Taoism's tranquility. Other than the sparring between two great grandmasters, the 8th and 9th realm martial artists loved to bully the top Qi refinement warriors of the middle 5 realms. Especially Song Jianqiang, the strongest 9th realm cultivator, could be said to be invincible below the upper 5 realms. Only the sword cultivators among the Qi refinement warriors could fight with him. However, they could only strive to not lose too badly and win a glorious defeat. However, there was an obscure reason that caused the 9th realm martial artists to be unscrupulous. That was the last level of the middle 5 realms, the 10th level great cultivators, had no interest in worldly disputes. They did not even care about the survival of their clan or the rise and fall of their dynasty. They only cared about the word Great Tao. Liu Baqiao was still immersed in his own thoughts. Song Jianqiang wants me to take the talisman sword with my own ability after leaving the town. Should I inform the Wind Thunder Garden and let them set up a celebration banquet early? Chen Songfeng did not know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the gurgling water that was no deeper than his knees, he thought of Song Jianqiang and the dissolute young man beside the vassal king. Chen Songfeng vaguely felt a sign of the gathering of the general trend. He decided that after returning to the Chen clan's ancestral home in Longwei County, he must persuade the clan to bet on the Dali dynasty. Even if he could not stake everything on one throw, he must let the Chen clan's disciples integrate into the Dali court as soon as possible. Chen Songfeng murmured, "The Dali phenomenon has already arrived, and the heavens and the earth are united. Therefore, my Chen clan must support the dragon, we must not compete with others for the dragon." Liu Baqiao asked, "What are you murmuring about?" Chen Songfeng stood up and shook his hand. He smiled and said, "You seem to hit it off with that young man from Clay Bottle Alley." Liu Baqiao also stood up and said casually, "Meeting by chance, meeting and parting is uncertain. God knows if we will meet again in the future." The two stepped on the spring grass by the stream and walked ashore. Chen Songfeng asked, "I heard that the blessed land in the southern stream kingdom will be opened to the public this winter. Dozens of people are allowed to enter. You are still unable to break through the bottleneck. Do you want to go down and try your luck?" Liu Baqiao sneered and said, "I'm determined not to go. Going to the ant colony to show off, I'm so embarrassed." Chen Songfeng shook his head and said, "My family's Mr. Liu once said that the state of mind is like a mirror, the more you polish it, the brighter it becomes. Therefore, cultivating the state of mind and being able to sit on the Tao ancestor's lotus throne is of great benefit. But occasionally crawling and rolling in a small quagmire may not necessarily be without benefits. Going to the blessed land to be a banished immortal who forgets his previous life and forgets his previous life, whether it is happiness or suffering, more or less." Without waiting for Chen Songfeng to finish, Liu Baqiao had already shouted, I am a person who cares too much about winning and losing. Once I go to the blessed land where the spiritual energy is thin, if I am unable to rely on my own ability to break through the taboo and return to my hometown, then it will definitely leave a knot in my heart. The gains will not make up for the losses, and the disadvantages will outweigh the advantages. Besides, if I am not careful and am bullied by the locals in the blessed land, it will be another knot in my heart. After I return to my senses, even if I have to pay a huge price, I will definitely descend into the world as a Daoist master. Only then will I be happy. But in this way, won't it go against my original intention? Liu Baqiao held the back of his head with both hands and said with a face full of disdain, to put it bluntly, who doesn't know that the 3 blessed lands in our eastern treasure bottle continent have long changed? They have already become places where those rich people from the secular dynasties spend money to have fun. No wonder they are said to be brothels under the rule of immortals. It is a foul atmosphere. Chen Songfeng smiled and said, "You can't generalize. Not to mention us foreigners, just the locals, there is no lack of amazing talents." Liu Baqiao rolled his eyes and said, "A blessed land, with so many people, how many people can stand out every year? Probably not even one. Of those who have successfully come to our place, in the past 100 years, how many of their names can be remembered by us? It can be counted on one hand. So I don't understand why these blessed lands are so respected. There are even people who say that as long as you have a part of the governing rights of a blessed land, the benefits will not be less than having a cultivator of the upper 5 realms. Are they crazy?" Chen Songfeng smiled and said, "The benefits of the blessed lands are long. Occasionally, there will be 1 or 2 surprises. The most important thing is that all the benefits are enjoyed by others. Who wouldn't be willing to take a share of it? Most of the people who came out of the grotto heaven had good lives. Those who came out of the blessed lands had especially hard lives." Liu Baqiao asked, "You don't seem to like that young man surnamed Chen?" Chen Songfeng thought for a while, and chose to reveal his thoughts. "If it is a personal matter, I don't have any opinions about the young man. But if it is a matter of fact, his existence is actually very embarrassing for our entire family. The disciples of the Chen family in Long Pearl Grotto Heaven have always been a joke in this continent. In the small town, there is only one of them left, and the rest have all become servants of other families. It is very normal for them to be reduced to a joke. In the eyes of the Chen family in Dragon Tail Commandery, although we have the same ancestry as the people surnamed Chen in the small town, that is the history of many years ago. There is no affection. However, all the opponents of the Chen family in Dragon Tail Commandery would not see it that way. Under such circumstances, if the young man from Mud Bottle Alley had simply become a servant of a large family, it would be fine. After that, it would be very difficult for him to continue to be a topic of conversation for many years. But this young man gritted his teeth and persevered. His existence alone is especially eye-catching. Many people are even betting that this branch of the Chen family in the small town will no longer be their only one. Liu Baqiao frowned and said, "This is not the young man's fault." Chen Songfeng smiled and said, "Of course, what did the young man do wrong? But in the end, there are some things in this world that are difficult to explain clearly." Liu Baqiao shook his head and said, "It is difficult to explain clearly. In fact, it is you who are unreasonable. It is only because the young man is too weak that you can appear to be righteous. In addition, the reputation of the Chen family in Dragon Tail Commandery is much greater than the young man's, but compared to the people around you who are laughing at you, you are very ordinary. Therefore, the situation is even more awkward. In the end, you are not willing to admit your incompetence, so you can only hint to yourselves that the young man is the main culprit. I believe that if it was not for the fact that Long Pearl Grotto Heaven is not easy to enter, the young man from the shabby alley who embarrassed the Chen family in Dragon Tail Commandery would have been secretly killed by the disciples of the Chen family in Dragon Tail Commandery, or by some guy from a vassal family." Chen Songfeng's face flushed red. For a moment, he actually became angry out of shame. Liu Baqiao held the back of his head and raised his head to look at the sky. He still had a leisurely and languid expression. "I know that you, Chen Songfeng, are not such a person. Unfortunately, there are very few people like you. There are many people who are not like you." Let's say that the mountain-moving ape of Xingyang Mountain was afraid that the Wind Thunder Garden would obtain the sword manual because he could not obtain it himself. Therefore, he wanted to kill the young man with the surname Liu with one punch. Do you think that is reasonable? I think that is very unreasonable. But is it useful? It is useless. I do not even dare to challenge the old ape directly. Liu Baqiao sighed and released one of his hands. He patted his stomach and said self-deprecatingly, "As for me, I am just clumsy with words. My fists are not hard enough and my sword is not fast enough. Otherwise, I would have accumulated a lot of principles in my stomach. I would like to have a good talk with this world." Chen Songfeng exhaled, "So you think that the young man is not bad?" Liu Baqiao turned his head to look at the mountain in the west where the sun had fallen. "Not bad? How is that possible?" Chen Songfeng was somewhat puzzled. Liu Baqiao said with a smile, "I feel ashamed when I see that young man." Chen Songfeng found it inconceivable. He shook his head and said with a smile, "Why do you have to go so far?" Liu Baqiao swallowed some of the words that were about to come out of his mouth to avoid feeling sad. Although Chen Songfeng was not to his liking, he was much better than the average scholar. He should be content with what he had. The talkative Liu Baqiao remained silent the entire way. The night was deep. Chen Pinggan made 3 torches and the 3 of them traveled with the fire. Finally, they arrived at the foot of a tall mountain. Chen Pinggan wiped the sweat from his forehead and said to Ning Yaro, "Miss Ning, tell her that this is a mountain that the imperial court has sealed. Does she have any taboos?" After Ning Yaro passed the message to Chen Dui, the latter shook her head. Chen Dui looked over. She was very certain that the ancestral tomb of the Chen family of Yingyan was definitely here. A wanderer returning to his home had a resonance in his heart. Chen Dui slowly closed her eyes. A moment later, she squatted down and used her finger to write a long string of characters on the ground. After she finished writing, her lips moved slightly. Finally, she used her palm to slowly erase all traces. After she got up, she walked around the place where the runes were destroyed and took the lead to climb the mountain. She did not even need Chen Pinggan to lead the way. The 3 of them arrived at a place halfway up the mountain. Chen Pinggan pointed not far away. There was a tree growing on a small mound. Its trunk was strange and extremely straight. It was even straighter than bamboo. Chen Pinggan felt relieved and nodded, "It's here." Chen Dui said in a deep voice, "Wait for me at the foot of the mountain." Ning Yaro pulled Chen Pinggan's sleeve, indicating that they should go down the mountain together. Chen Dui put down the book box and carefully took out the carefully prepared offerings one by one to worship the gods and ancestors. Halfway through, Chen Dui was absent-minded for a moment. She looked at the small tree in a daze. Tears of joy filled her eyes and she muttered, "As expected, as expected." In the end, the woman sincerely kowtowed 3 times and 9 times to the small mound. After that, Chen Dui prostrated on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "The Chen family of Yingyan thanks the ancestor for your protection." At the foot of the mountain, Chen Pinggan and Ning Yaro each sat on one side of the basket with their backs facing each other. Ning Yaro asked, "There was a part of the journey before. Why did you deliberately take the longer route?" Chen Pinggan was stunned and said in shock, "Miss Ning, even you could tell?" Ning Yaro held the scabbard and pushed it back. The tip of the scabbard hit the back of the youth's waist. "Remove the word Lian." The young man in straw sandals grimaced and gently rubbed his waist. He lowered his voice and said, "Didn't I tell you before? There's a big cliff full of those black stones that you call the dragon beheading platform. I'm afraid that she'll see them. She knows what's good for her. What if she has evil intentions? Don't have the intention to harm others, but don't let your guard down. I understand this principle." Ning Yaro smiled, "Scrooge, you're just worried that she would think of a way to take it away, leaving you empty-handed." Chen Pinggan laughed foolishly, "Miss Ning, you're so straightforward. You don't have many friends, right?" Ouch. Suddenly, Chen Pinggan felt another wave of pain. He quickly freed one of his hands and rubbed the other side of his waist. Chen Pinggan suddenly used his elbow to lightly touch Ning Yaro's back and asked, "Do you want to eat wild fruits? I picked 3 on the way here and hid them in my sleeve." She shouldn't have seen them. Ning Yarrow said in a bad mood, "How can wild fruits taste good in this season?" Chen Pingan turned around and handed over 2 red fruits the size of peaches. He said with a smile, "Miss Ning, you don't know. This kind of fruit can only be eaten in spring. It's firm at the end of winter and ripe at the beginning of spring. It's completely ripe now. TSK, TSK, TSK. The taste is so good that you might accidentally bite off your tongue. What's more strange is that there are so many mountains here, but only this area has this kind of fruit. I came here with old Yarrow to look for a kind of soil. He told me that there are some wild fruits in other places that taste good, but I've eaten them here and there and I feel that they're not as good as this one." Ning Yarrow took the 2 fruits and made up her mind to return the other one if it didn't taste good. "You're still eating here and there. Are you a wild boar in the mountains?" Chen Pingan bit into the wild fruit and smiled. "When I was young, my family was poor, so I couldn't just eat whatever I could get my hands on. You don't have to say, there was one time when I really ate blindly and my stomach hurt. It was so painful that I rolled around in the alley. That was the first time I heard my own heartbeat. It was like a thunderclap." Unfortunately, Ning Yarrow was too busy eating the fruit to hear what the youth said. The first time she took a bite, she felt that the fruit was exceptionally sweet. After the fruit entered her stomach, she felt warm all over. Her body was like a house with an earth dragon and the wild fruit was like a bag of charcoal. Ning Yarrow closed her eyes and felt her organs. Although she felt comfortable all over, there was nothing else wrong. This meant that this wild fruit could be considered an item that could be found on a mountain beneath the feet of a celestial being. But it was limited to this. It could definitely be sold for a high price in a mortal dynasty, but it wouldn't be enough to make a cultivator jealous. To the mortals at the foot of the mountain, it was undoubtedly a priceless treasure that could prolong their lives. If Ning Yarrow had known this earlier, she wouldn't have taken the fruit. Ning Yarrow felt a bit regretful. She wiped her mouth and handed over the remaining wild fruit. "It doesn't taste good. I'll return it to you." Chen Pingan resentfully took it back. He was a bit disappointed. He thought that Miss Ning would think it was good. Ning Yarrow lightly kicked the basket on her back. She casually asked, "Are you leaving it for that woman called Chen Xiong?" Chen Pingan shook his head. "Why would I give it to her? We're not related to each other. Of course I'm leaving it for Liu Xianyang." Ning Yarrow suddenly asked curiously, "If Wan Xiu was here, would you give it to Wan Xiu instead of Chen Xiong?" Chen Pingan nodded. "Of course." Ning Yarrow asked again, "Then if you only had 2 wild fruits, would you give them to me or to Wan Xiu?" Chen Pingan said without hesitation, "I'll give one to you and one to Wan Xiu. I'll just watch you guys eat." Chen Pingan suffered another sneak attack. He rubbed his back and innocently asked, "Miss Ning, what are you doing?" Ning Yarrow asked again, "If there's only one?" Chen Pingan chuckled. "I'll give it to you." Ning Yarrow asked, "Why?" Chen Pingan said slyly and honestly, "Miss Wan isn't here, but Miss Ning is." The youth's back was hit hard twice. It hurt so much that Chen Pingan quickly got up and jumped around. As a result, Ning Yarrow fell into the large basket. Chen Pingan quickly pulled her out of the basket. Ning Yarrow didn't get angry. She just glared at Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan held the basket and the two sat back to back again. Ning Yarrow asked, "Do you know what kind of tree that tree is?" Chen Pingan shook his head. "I don't know. I've only seen it in this place. I don't think there's any in the other mountains." Ning Yarrow said in a deep voice, "It's said that if a family mausoleum gives birth to a regular tree, it's an auspicious sign that the scholarly sage is about to be born. Moreover, this sage is bound to be extremely upright and full of righteousness. Therefore, in your world, he'll definitely be favored." Chen Pingan nodded. What scholarly sage? Auspicious sign? Righteousness? This straw sandals youth didn't understand. Ning Yarrow asked, "Aren't you envious of that woman on the mountain? Haven't you thought about why this regular tree doesn't grow on the graves of your ancestors?" Chen Pingan didn't answer the question. He happily said, "This year's Qingming festival, I can visit my parents' graves. It's really good." Ning Yarrow suddenly stood up. This time, It was Chen Pingan's turn to sit in the basket. Ning Yarrow held her belly and laughed. There were only 5 children left in the town school. They came from different backgrounds and ages. Among them, there was a little girl wearing a red cotton-padded jacket. Although she came from Fulu Street, she never bullied others in the school. However, she didn't like to join in the fun either. She always liked to wander around by herself. In the westernmost part of the town, Li Huai's son, Li Huai, was also studying in this village school. His parents took his sister and left the town, leaving him alone. Li Huai didn't cry or make a fuss. Instead, he was overjoyed. Finally, he didn't have to be controlled by others. However, at night, this child, who was staying at his uncle's house, woke up from a nightmare and began to howl at the top of his lungs. As a result, his uncle and aunt, who had woken up, worked together to suppress him. One used a feather duster, while the other used a broom. The other 3 came from Peach Leaf Alley, Dragon Rider Alley, and Apricot Blossom Alley. They were 2 men and 1 woman. After class, Mr. Chi gave each of them a piece of calligraphy. He asked them to keep it safe and carefully copy it. He said that he would check their homework in 3 days. It was the word Chi. After the students left, the old man who was sweeping the floor took a bath and changed his clothes. He came to Mr. Chi's study and sat on the ground. The old man asked a classic question about the first month of the King of Spring. Chi Jing-chun smiled knowingly and explained what was spring, what was king, what was right, and what was the moon. This was the unique asking the difficult questions of the major Confucian academies. During the class, there would be a teacher questioning arranged to ask the lecturer. The teacher could ask 1 question, several questions, 10 questions, or even 100 questions. This questioning took place when Mr. Chi and the old man first met. That was 80 years ago. However, at that time, Chi Jing-chun was the one who asked, and the person who answered was the teacher of both of them. After the old man finished asking all the questions, he looked at Chi Jing-chun. Do you still remember the teacher's parting words before we went to Cliff Academy? Chi Jing-chun smiled but didn't say anything. The old man answered his own question. The sentence he gave me was, "Heaven and earth give birth to a gentleman, and a gentleman rules heaven and earth." The sentence he gave you was, "You can't learn anymore. Green comes from blue, and green comes from blue." The old man suddenly became very excited. Teacher thinks so highly of you. He hopes that you will surpass him. Why do you have to stay here and refuse to turn back until you hit the wall? Why do you have to give up your 100-year cultivation and 1,000-year great path for a small town with only 5 or 6,000 people? If you were an ordinary scholar, it would be fine. But you are Chi Jing-chun, our teacher's most valued and proud disciple. You are a scholar who has the potential to start a new life and even establish a sect. The old man trembled and said, "I know. It's Buddhism that has wronged you. All living beings are equal. Have you forgotten what the teacher said about the noble and lowly?" Chi Jing-chun smiled and shook his head. Although the teacher is a teacher, and his knowledge is naturally great, his reasoning may not be all right. The old man was shocked to the extreme. His face was full of astonishment, and then he shouted angrily, "The person of etiquette is the true body." Chi Jing-chun smiled and replied, "When a gentleman retracts, he withdraws. When he extends, he extends." It seemed that there was no reason, and they were thousands of miles apart. But after the old man heard it, his face changed dramatically and was full of surprise. Chi Jing-chun sighed and looked at his junior brother who had followed him here for 60 years. He said seriously, "Things have come to this. Those children will be entrusted to you to send to the Cliff Academy." The old man nodded and left with a complicated expression. Chi Jing-chun said to himself, "Teacher, is there a true righteousness in this world?" 2 carriages set off from Fulu Street long before dawn and left the town early. At dawn, a young man with straw sandals carried 2 large cloth bags and set off to wait for someone outside the Kill Supervision office. One of the bags was filled with gold and copper coins, while the other one was filled with snake gall stones that he thought were the most valuable. But when the sun rose and the concierge came out to sweep the streets, the young man still did not see the departing carriages. He could only thicken his skin and ask the concierge when the group of guests named Chen Dui would set off from Fulu Street. The concierge smiled and said that they had left the town long ago. The young man with straw sandals was dumbfounded. Didn't that fellow Liu Xianyang make an appointment with him to leave after dawn? At that moment, the young man's vision was a bit blurry. After thanking the concierge, the young man turned around and ran. Running out of the town, the young man ran for nearly 60 miles in one breath. Finally, he followed a slope. The exhausted young man walked to the top of the slope and looked at the winding road that extended all the way out. The young man squatted at the top of the mountain, and beside his feet were the copper coins and stones that he had not given away. A young girl with a sword and a saber sat silently beside him. She panted and said angrily, "Aren't you a moneygrubber? Why are you so generous? You want to give away all your belongings? Even if Liu Xianyang is your friend, he shouldn't be so extravagant." The young man only held his head and looked into the distance. 68. Qi Jingquan's huge Dharma idol was pure white and ethereal. It sat solemnly on the northernmost territory of the eastern treasure continent. The sea of clouds surged and slowly pressed down, approaching Qi Jingquan's head. Qi Jingquan looked up and smiled freely. Above the sea of clouds, a dignified voice sounded. "Qi Jingquan, you have to know that the heavenly Tao is selfless. As a disciple of the Confucian school, it's understandable that you have compassion for the Black Pearl Cave. If you change your mind now, there's still room for negotiation." Accompanied by the words of the immortal in the sky, it was as if waves of thunder were rolling rapidly in the sea of clouds. The flashing lightning and thunder continuously seeped out from the bottom of the sea of clouds. Words were law. Another immortal sneered and said, "Why are you talking nonsense with this bookworm? If you want to do something that can support the heavens and the earth, you have to ask if my fist agrees or not." At the same time, the sea of clouds was scooped up by a huge golden palm. After pushing away the thick clouds and revealing a hole, a pillar of light landed in front of Qi Jingquan's Dharma idol. A Buddhist chant sounded from the west and said sympathetically, "Benefactor Qi, calm your mind and transcend the land of Buddhism." Qi Jingquan said in a low voice, "After the battle of the dragon-slaying battle, the town will enjoy 3,000 years of great luck. The descendants of the future generations will be outstanding. However, since it is a rule set by the four saints, the first batch of cultivators who chose to take root in the Black Pearl Grotto heaven did not object. I, Qi Jingquan, naturally have no right to interfere in this matter. Now that the heavenly Tao wants to suppress this world, just come. It's just me, Qi Jingquan, who will bear this calamity for the people of the town. The heavenly Tao and rules have not fallen into vain. Why are you stopping me?" The immortal who had reached out and created a huge hole in the sea of clouds laughed wantonly. "Haha, Qi, do you really not know the reason, or are you pretending to be crazy?" Unknowingly, Qi Jingquan had already stretched out her hand and grabbed the pearl that contained a small cave. She clenched her hand into a fist and held it in her palm. Thinking about it, in the palm of his hand, in the grotto heaven, and above the small town, it was a mysterious scene where day suddenly turned into night. At this moment, the snow-white palm that protected Qi Jingquan's paradise seemed to have suffered an invisible attack that came from all directions, and it sizzled while white arcs of lightning ceaselessly sprayed out from the back of his hand. Snowflakes that seemed to be small like feathers but were actually large like mountains were ceaselessly falling from the back of his hand and falling to the ground. However, they vanished into thin air before they could land on the ground. The immortal sitting high up in the clouds near the hole in the sea of clouds sneered, "Little Confucian, you're going against the great Tao and overestimating yourself. Let me play with you first." If one looked from afar in the eastern vase continent and was able to break through the concealment array created by the immortals, one would be able to vaguely see an incomparably spectacular scene. In the huge hole in the sea of clouds, first, a black dot was revealed. Then, a sword tip was revealed, and finally, the whole picture was finally revealed. It was a pocket-sized flying sword that was the length of a finger of Qi Jingquan's Dharma form. As soon as the first sword appeared, the second sword followed and fell from another place. The third and fourth sword descended from the sea of clouds in the sky one after another. There were a total of 12 flying swords. They lined up in a line and hovered in the sky. It was like a cavalry that was in a formation and had its reins pulled tight. It was only waiting for an order to charge into the formation. Above the sea of clouds, a golden giant was casually sitting with his legs crossed. He opened his huge golden eyes and rested his fists on his knees. His right fist slowly pulled out an index finger and flicked it. A flying sword was the first to shoot toward Qi Jingquan's empty fist. The speed of the flying sword was as fast as lightning. On the trajectory, it pulled out an endless cloud tail. The flying sword instantly pierced through Qi Jingquan's Dharma form's arm. When it was only a few feet away from the ground, it suddenly stopped. Above the sea of clouds, the golden giant's right index finger gently rotated. The flying sword drew an arc and returned to the sky. At the same time, his left hand lightly flicked the finger. The flying sword that was originally suspended in the air suddenly fell and pierced Qi Jingquan's arm again. The two fingers rose and fell. The 12 flying swords fell straight down and returned in an arc. They rose and fell, and so on. After Qi Jingquan's arm was shot by the flying swords, it became riddled with wounds and countless black holes appeared on it. Compared to the original white body of the towering Dharma idol, it was particularly shocking. Qi Jingquan's expression was calm. He saw that another wave of flying swords was about to pierce him and start a new round of killing. It was really aggressive. Qi Jingquan said lightly, proud of success. A flying sword was still piercing straight toward Qi Jingquan's arm. But this time, before it could pierce into the arm, it was like a pine needle being blown askew by a gust of wind. Not only this flying sword, but also the following 11 flying swords, without exception, returned without any success. They circled around Qi Jingquan's Dharma form and flew slowly in a certain fixed trajectory. The swords trembled and waited for an opportunity to move, slightly hissing. Not only that, but the waves of spring wind between heaven and earth also supported the falling sea of clouds without leaving a trace. The golden giant bared his chest and looked down at the 12 flying swords with an unbridled air. He was a little surprised to see that he could not find any flaw in the 12 flying swords. Qi Jingquan did not pay much attention to these flying swords that were incomparably powerful to human cultivators. He kept staring at the clenched fist. There was a saying in the world that a pearl was old and yellow. The pearl suspended in the sky above the eastern vast continent of Liju Cave had been around for 3,000 years. It should have been in the hands of the next saint, Yuan Qi, 60 years later. The outer wall that covered and protected the pearl would be completely broken. Like a piece of porcelain, the outer layer of glaze would fall off and be peeled off. At that time, the way of heaven would crush down with irresistible force. Although no one would die on the spot, everyone in the town would lose their next life. Qi Jingquan specially read the Buddhist scriptures for this and even deduced a terrible consequence. The 6,000 people in the town would be used as scapegoats to bear the mighty power of heaven. They might fall into the hungry ghost path of the Western Buddhist kingdom forever and never be able to escape. As the last saint of Liju Cave, Yuan Qi, the military cultivator and sword forger, would not be responsible for the safety of the people in the town. Instead, he would not let anyone escape the punishment of the way of heaven. The golden giant's voice was like a drum that rumbled through the sky. He laughed and said, "Some people say that you, Qi Jingquan, are not simple. You have 2 natal characters. Besides the character of spring, you also have the character of silence that breaks the rules. Come, 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 let me see." Every time the giant said a word, he would hit his knee with his fist. After 3 times, the sea of clouds surged violently like boiling water in a pot. At the bottom of the sea of clouds, the breeze that was originally invisible to the naked eye also shook. The light became chaotic and alternated between bright and dark. The giant said, "You have the spring breeze, but I have the rain of flying swords to pour cold water on you." After he said that, countless golden threads penetrated the sea of clouds and the breeze. If the giant's body was used as a comparison, those golden threads were like tiny embroidery needles that were the length of a fingernail. They were densely packed and there were tens of thousands of them. After they gathered together, the momentum was great and shocking. Qi Jingquan was still staring at his fist. After hearing that, His expression did not change. He said softly, "Good rain knows the season. When spring comes, it will happen." On the ground around the Dharma idol that was sitting upright, raindrops splashed out. Every raindrop seemed small and negligible, but they were actually as big as a pool. Then, these raindrops that were constantly emerging slid into the sky against common sense. The curtain of rain hung upside down. It was all because of the poem that the scholarly sage, Qi Jing Chun, recited. The golden rain of flying swords came down from the top. The curtain of spring rain that rose from the ground came up from the bottom. They collided together fiercely. There were a myriad of phenomena above his head, but Qi Jingchun did not see, listen, or speak. Around Qi Jingchun's fist, lightning dragons appeared out of thin air and smashed on the back of his hand. The lightning was divided into 3 colors: scarlet, bluish-purple, and snow-white. It seemed chaotic, but the 3 were clearly separated and did not intertwine with each other. They were intertwined into 3 large nets. The Dharma idol's fist shattered and the feathers of the flying swords fluttered as it continued to weaken. Qi Jingchun said softly, "It's calm." Among the 3 colors of lightning, only the snow-white lightning remained motionless without any warning. However, the other 2 types of lightning still followed the rules. This caused a scarlet lightning to break a snow-white lightning with a bang, and a bluish-purple lightning to bind the scarlet lightning. The heavenly net that had always been narrow but never missed had actually become chaotic and disorderly. Above the sea of clouds, an old voice sounded leisurely. "There's a law of movement and stillness." However, in the blink of an eye, the 3 lightning nets that were originally chaotic regained their order in the chaos of the vast heavenly might. Again and again, they hit the fist of Qi Jingchun's Dharma idol. Qi Jingchun sighed softly. "Small fights are more or less enough. Qi Jingchun, do you dare to take this fist of mine?" A golden fist fell from the hole in the sea of clouds towards Qi Jingchun's head. Qi Jingchun's free right hand was raised high with her palm facing upwards, blocking the fist that was pressing down on her. Qi Jingchun's Dharma idol suddenly fell 1,000 feet, but the sea of clouds was also lifted 1,000 feet by a surge of wind. It was as if there was a distance of 2,000 feet between heaven and earth. Again, the golden immortal's fists landed one after another, each with the force of a thunderbolt. Perhaps any of the 5 mountains and majestic mountains of the eastern treasure bottle continent would not be able to withstand his fist. The snow-white Qi Jingchun's Dharma idol only raised his arm high. First, a large hole was smashed in the Dharma idol's palm, then the entire palm shattered with a bang. Following that, the golden fist smashed the arm into pieces. Qi Jingchun, whose Dharma idol was greatly damaged, was still indifferent. All of his attention was still on his left hand, which was clenched into a fist. From the fist to the entire arm, then to the shoulder, it was covered with Daoist talisman that was covered with lightning. Every word was as big as a house. The old voice continued, "Don't be stubborn. Qi Jingchun, if you are willing, you can follow me in cultivation." Qi Jingchun turned his head slightly and looked down at the arm that was full of holes. It was already covered with the supreme prophecies written by the Daoist sect's saint. What a good way to enforce justice on behalf of heaven. Qi Jingchun sighed softly and said in a low voice, "Peace." The old voice revealed a hint of anger. "Qi Jingchun, how dare you?" The angry shout forcibly covered the 2 words after Qi Jingchun's peace. In the sky, 2 fingers were closed together like a sword, easily breaking through the sea of clouds and slashing down. It actually directly cut off Qi Jingchun's arm that was clenched into a fist from the shoulder. In the distance, there was an imperceptible sigh full of regret. The scholarly sage did not overstep the rules. Qi Jingchun should not have crossed the Daoist sect's lightning pool. After the finger sword successfully chopped off Qi Jingchun's arm, it seemed that its master's anger was still there. The 2 fingers quickly retracted back into the sea of clouds, but it didn't stop there. Instead, with an even faster speed, it pierced toward the floating fist that was like a tree without roots and water without a source. Qi Jingchun retracted the right arm that was left above his head and quickly blocked above the bead, hugging it in front of him to protect himself. The 2 fingers of the immortal went forward and penetrated the arm of Qi Jingchun's Dharma idol without any suspense. The fist from the golden giant that came from the hole also hit the head of Qi Jingquan's Dharma idol. Qi Jingquan's Dharma idol was on the verge of collapse. Although its arm was broken, its sleeves were still fluttering. It had the charm of a scholar. However, the more it was like this, the more tragic it was. After being punched in the head again, Qi Jingquan's Dharma idol continued to sink. One punch after another, as if it would not stop until the scholar was smashed deep into the ground. The dilapidated Dharma idol protected the fist in front of it, the bead, the pearl grotto heaven, and the people who would call him Mr. Qi when they met. The Dharma idol's lips moved slightly as it chanted silently. The stars rotate, the sun and the moon shine, the 4 seasons represent the emperor, yin and yang increase, wind and rain increase, all things are born in harmony, and all things are nourished in their own way, in the small grotto heaven. In the village school, there was not a single child present. There was a Confucian scholar in a green robe sitting alone. Not only was his temples white, but his hair was also snow white. The scholar was bleeding from his 7 orifices, and his flesh was badly mutilated. His soul was shattered more thoroughly than a porcelain that had fallen heavily to the ground. The scholar had an extremely happy expression. He closed his eyes and smiled, passing away suddenly. There was Qi Jingquan in the world. The world was happy, and so was I. That year, in this world, spring left very late, and summer came very late. 69. It was as if the town had encountered a heavenly eclipse that was hard to come by in 100 years. All of a sudden, it was pitch black and people couldn't even see their own fingers. In addition, the statues outside the town were exploding like firecrackers. The sound became more and more frequent. When the town was silent because of the darkness, it was particularly ear-piercing. This undoubtedly deepened the speculations of the ordinary people in the town. Thinking of the ox carts and horse carriages that carried the children of the big families, the people in the streets and alleys were all uneasy. Inside the high walls of the 4 families and 10 clans, without exception, every time a servant or maid wanted to act on their own and hang up a lantern high up, they would be loudly reprimanded. Some hot-tempered stewards of the family would even slap those lanterns on the spot and trample them with their feet. With a ferocious expression, they stared at those kind-hearted servants as if they were enemies. In the blacksmith shop, Chen Pinggan and Ning Yarrow were sitting at the mouth of the well having lunch. After dark, although Chen Pinggan felt strange, it didn't affect him from lowering his head and eating. The food in the blacksmith shop was quite good. Every meal, both long and short, was given a piece of fatty red braised pork that was the width of an index finger and a spoonful of oil. There was enough rice, but there was only 1 piece of meat. Chen Pinggan's appetite was about 2 big bowls of rice. Therefore, every time he got a piece of meat from the head chef, because there was soup, he would only eat in the first bowl without touching the meat. In the end, the piece of red braised pork would slide from the top of the bowl to the bottom of the bowl little by little. Then, he would run to the second bowl of rice and finish the meat cleanly. Every time Ning Yarrow saw Chen Pinggan eating that meal, she wanted to laugh. Ruan Xiao, on the other hand, was not like Ning Yarrow. The girl in green looked at Chen Pinggan as if there were 4 big words written in her eyes: kindred spirits. At this time, Chen Pinggan was holding an empty big white bowl in one hand and a pair of chopsticks in the other. He tried his best to look around, but could only vaguely see the scene within 20 to 30 feet. For the past 2 days, in addition to working like an ox and horse for Master Ruan's blacksmith shop, Chen Pinggan had to take out 6 hours to practice his walking stance. 1 hour during the day, from noon to Weisha, and 2 hours at night, from Haisha to Chou. Later on, Chen Pinggan tried to form a sword furnace with his 10 fingers as he walked, but Chen Pinggan found that this would make his breathing difficult and his steps even more unstable, so he decisively gave up. Chen Pinggan only trained the sword furnace to nourish his body when no one was paying attention. In fact, for Chen Pinggan, it was just replacing the porcelain furnace with the sword furnace in the Shaking Mountain manual. In the beginning, Ning Yarrow would occasionally follow behind him. After pretending to give him pointers a few times, she would no longer appear. Chen Pinggan didn't want to attract any gossip. During the day, he would practice the fist stance along the downstream of the stream. He would run a mile away from the blacksmith's shop before he started practicing. Then he would make a round trip, which would take him about 10 miles. For Chen Pinggan, this was an unbreakable new family rule. At this time, sitting at the mouth of the well, Ning Yarrow looked at the sky that was covered with a black cloth. Her long and narrow eyebrows that made her lose her beautiful impression slightly frowned. Chen Pinggan whispered, "Is it related to Mr. Qi?" Ning Yarrow didn't plan to tell him the truth. She only gave a vague answer, "Since Mr. Qi is the owner of this cave, it should be related to him." Chen Pinggan asked again, "According to Song Jisin and Ji Qiu, Mr. Qi originally planned to leave the town with the school attendant Zhao Yarrow. Why didn't he leave in the end?" Ning Yarrow shook her head and smiled. "The mind of a sage is like a dragon's vein. It can stretch for thousands of miles. I can't guess, and I'm too lazy to guess." After saying this, she threw the bowl and chopsticks in Chen Pinggan's hands. She got up and went to a yellow mud-thatched hut that belonged to her alone. Ning Yarrow was also very curious about why Master Wan was so polite to her. Could it be that Master Wan had seen through her identity? The possibility was very small. After all, Inverted Hanging Mountain was not located in Eastern Vase continent. Moreover, Inverted Hanging Mountain had almost no connection with the outside world. It was very famous and had very few guests. Moreover, people in Inverted Hanging Mountain were not sure about her identity. However, Ning Yarrow was a person who would cross the bridge when it came to it. Even if the bridge was not straight, she could still cut a straight path with her sword. Master Wan, the #1 swordsmith in Eastern Vase continent, was showing her kindness generously. Chen Pinggan took the bowl and chopsticks and was just about to go to the kitchen when he saw someone walking by not far away. It was a young man with wide sleeves. He looked more like a scholar than Chen Songfeng. There was an indescribable feeling. He looked a little like Mr. Qi, but also a little like the supervisor Song he met in Mud Bottle Alley. When the man saw the straw sandals teenager sitting alone in a daze at the mouth of the well and looking at him, he was slightly surprised. He came to the teenager's side and said with a warm smile, "I'm looking for Master Wan. Do you know where he is?" This time, Chen Pinggan did not deliberately hide it from Cai Qinqian and Fu Nanhua like he did in Mud Bottle Alley. Instead, he directly pointed out the direction to the man. First, Miss Ning told him about Master Wan's power. Second, the man in front of him did not give Chen Pinggan the feeling of a gloomy and shrewd person. Chen Pinggan asked politely, "Do you need me to lead the way?" The young man was not in a hurry. He looked at Chen Pinggan and said with a smile, "No, it's just a few steps. It's no trouble." "Thank you." Chen Pinggan smiled and nodded. He walked to the kitchen while the man walked to a swordsmith room in the distance. After Chen Pinggan returned the bowls and chopsticks, he found that the temporary apprentices were all gathered in a few houses. They lit up oil lamps and were talking about why day and night were reversed. Some people said with certainty that a mountain god of a certain mountain crossed the boundary and caused the water in the stream and well to drop. Therefore, it angered the river god who was in charge of the stream and a fight between the gods broke out. There were also people who used the words of the older generation to refute. They said that here, the mountains were sealed by the imperial court, so how could there be a mountain god? Besides, there was no way a river god would appear in such a small stream. Chen Pinggan did not get involved. He had nothing to do anyway, so he used his extraordinary eyesight to go to the bottom of the last well. He carried baskets of soil out of the well. After climbing out of the well along the wooden ladder, he happened to see the man returning from the swordsmith room. He also noticed the young man's figure, but he did not approach or stop. He only waved goodbye to Chen Pinggan from afar. Chen Pinggan felt a little emotional. Whether this person was good or bad, at least he was different from the people from Zhengyang Mountain, Yunxia Mountain, Qingfeng City, and Old Dragon City. Chen Pinggan carried soil out of the well again and again. After the last trip out of the well, he found Wan Xiu standing near the wheel of the well. She had a handkerchief in her hand and a pile of small pastries. When Chen Pinggan appeared, Wan Xiu extended her hand to him. Chen Pinggan, who was covered in dirt and had dirty hands, smiled and shook his head. Then Wan Xiu sat on the well and ate the exquisite pastries from the shop in Dragon Rider Alley. The blue-clothed girl was quickly immersed in it, her entire being brimming with happiness and joy. Chen Pinggan continued to move the soil back and forth. After more than 10 times, the ponytailed girl was nowhere to be seen. However, there was a handkerchief and a piece of cake left on the well. It was the famous peach blossom wine cake from the shop. Chen Pinggan was stunned. He had no choice but to take down the basket on his back and put it beside his feet. He sat on the well near the handkerchief and wiped his hands on his clothes. He picked up the cake with 2 fingers and put it into his mouth. Chen Pinggan nodded vigorously. It was indeed delicious. After all, he had eaten 10 coins. When he thought of this, Chen Pinggan immediately felt that it was even more delicious. A few hours later, the sky was still dark. From time to time, there was a dull sound of beating drums. Other than that, there was nothing unusual about the town. Master Ron made an exception and let the short-term workers in his blacksmith shop rest for 2 days. He let them go back to their homes and not wait for dawn to continue working. Chen Pinggan was among them. He simply returned to the town and went to Liu Xianyang's house. When he found that there was nothing missing, he quickly turned off the lights and locked the door. He then ran to his house in Clay Bottle Alley. For some reason, Chen Pinggan felt that the town today was lifeless and lifeless. Chen Pinggan did not know that when he ran through the corridor of the covered bridge. Under the bridge, there was a tall woman floating on the water. Her clothes were white and her hair was white. Her bare hands and feet were like fine jade. She was tilting her head and using the stream as a mirror. She held her hair with one hand and combed it with the other. No one could see her face clearly. 70. The current state of the town was like a sandbox that General Dali ordered people to build. The war had already ended, so he decided to abandon it and cover it with a black cloth. Chen Pinggan lit an oil lamp in his house and began to count his belongings. There were 3 bags of gold coins, 1 for the tribute money, 1 for the spring festival money, and 1 for the victory money. 1 bag was given by the prince of the Great Sui Kingdom to thank him for letting him meet the golden carp. Gu Kan left the other 2 bags as the money to buy the loach. As for the 2 bags of coins that Chen Pinggan originally wanted to thank him, Chen Pinggan earnestly asked her to give them to Liu Xianyang on their way out of the mountain. Although Chen Pinggan was confused, she did not refuse. Perhaps she was surprised by the choice of the young man in the shabby alley, or perhaps she was in a good mood after successfully worshipping the ancestors. Chen Pinggan smiled for the first time and said some heartfelt words in a soft voice, so that Chen Pinggan could rest assured. She told him that the promise of being a direct descendant of the Chen family in Yingyan was definitely more valuable than the 2 bags of gold coins. Chen Pinggan was actually skeptical and did not dare to fully believe it. However, when Ning Yaro heard that she was a direct descendant of the Chen family in Yingyan, she privately asked Chen Pinggan to relax. Mr. Qi had given him a total of 4 seals twice. The first 2 seals, Jingshan Proud and Chen 11, were Mr. Qi's private collection of snake gallstones. The next 2 seals were carved by Mr. Qi according to the snake gallstones that Chen Pinggan gave him. 1 seal was in small seal script while the other was in official script. Coincidentally, the 2 seals could be put together to form a painting of green mountains and clear waters. One was thick and the other was delicate and soft. Mr. Qi carved the words mountain and water respectively. According to Ning Yaro, it could be called a pair of mountain watermarks. Chen Pinggan put the 2 prescriptions and 3 pieces of paper from Lu Daozhong on the table. Ning Yaro had once despised Daoist Lu's words for being bland and tasteless. His words were like those of a scholar from a secular dynasty who had to cater to the imperial examinations. He was well-behaved and humble. Naturally, Chen Pinggan could not tell the depth of the young Taoist priest's handwriting. He would not belittle the 3 pieces of paper just because of Ning Yaro's low evaluation. Moreover, before he left, Priest Lu had said that it was not easy to buy books and learn how to read in this small town. If Chen Pinggan wanted to learn how to read, he could start with his prescription. At this moment, Chen Pinggan carefully picked up the last piece of paper. Previously, he had seen the 4 words Lu Chen's edict written in vermilion at the end, but he did not think too much about it. However, now that he had as many as 4 seals, he felt that those few small words were especially cute and amiable. Chen Pinggan thought that when he had extra money in his pocket, he would buy books one day and keep them at home. Then, on the title page or the last page, he would gently stamp the words Chen 11. When Chen Pinggan thought of this, he could not help but grin. However, Chen Pinggan soon felt a little awkward. With the seal, he needed ink paste. Next to the New Year's shop that specialized in selling pastries in the Dragon Rider Alley, there was a shop that sold all kinds of sundries, with a signboard with the character's straw head. Song Jisin and his maidservant Shigue often patronized this shop. The so-called 4 treasures of the study and clean desk were all bought from there. Chen Pinggan hesitated for a moment. He felt that when he became literate in the future, he would buy a box of ink paste if he came across a book that he fell in love with at first sight. In addition, there was also the sack of carefully selected snake gall stones. There were 7 or 8 stones with different colors. However, even after being out of the water for so long, the colors still did not fade. The sack on the table opened. The stones were as big as a young man's palm, as small as a child's fist, and as small as a pigeon's egg. They were all nestled together and looked very likable. Chen Pinggan originally wanted to give them to Liu Xianyang. Although Song Jisin was a harsh scholar, there was a saying that made a lot of sense. It roughly meant that if the same small thing was placed in the hands of a stall outside Mud Bottle Alley, it would be sold for a few coins and would take a lot of effort. However, if it was placed in the cabinet of Cao Chu's shop, it would cost at least 3 or 4 taels of silver. If the customer wanted to buy it or not, they could leave if they did not have the money. Chen Pinggan felt that Song Jisin's words made a lot of sense. Therefore, if he left the snake gall stone with him and left it in the small town, it would probably not sell for a high price. However, if he gave it to Liu Xianyang, he would definitely get more money than Chen Pinggan if he went to the big place where Yin's Chen family was located. Even if he was cheated and haggled, he would definitely get more money than Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan did not need to think about whether it was better to own a thatched cottage or let his friend win a mountain of gold and silver. Otherwise, why would he be friends with Liu Xianyang? Therefore, even if Chen Pinggan felt that Liu Baqiao from the Wind and Thunder Garden was not a bad person, no matter how Liu Baqiao called him brother, Chen Pinggan would never take it seriously from the beginning to the end. He would never agree with him. Chen Pinggan finally picked up the jade hairpin. Mr. Qi said that it was given to him by his teacher in the early years. It was an ordinary item and not a rare treasure. There were 8 small words engraved on the jade hairpin. Ning Yarrow had explained the sentence, speaking of a gentleman, he is as gentle as jade. Gentleman. Although Chen Pinggan was not educated, he still felt that this word must be a very important title. Ning Yarrow's voice came from the door, "Why don't you put this hairpin on? Since he is willing to give it to you, he naturally wants you to make the best use of it." Chen Pinggan, who was in a daze, looked up and asked with a smile, "Why are you here?" Ning Yarrow sat across the table from Chen Pinggan and glanced at the hairpin in Chen Pinggan's hand. "I have checked it carefully. It is indeed an ordinary hairpin. There is no hidden mystery. At first, I thought it was a small cave." Chen Pinggan was confused. "What?" Ning Yarrow looked at the table of Chen Pinggan's family heirloom and explained, "Have you heard of the saying that there is a different cave?" The common people only think of it as a rhetorical statement by scholars and don't take it seriously. There are 2 types of grotto heavens in the world. One is the Black Pearl Grotto Heaven that we are in. It is one of the 10 major grotto heavens and 36 minor grotto heavens. It is the grotto heaven of the Blessed Land. Some of its territories are vast, spanning tens of thousands of kilometers. Legend has it that the Tao ancestor possesses a lotus grotto heaven. Although it is one of the 36 minor grotto heavens, the surface of a single lotus leaf is even larger than the capital of your great Li dynasty. Chen Pinggan was shocked and doubted, "Is it possible?" Ning Yarrow smiled and gave him a thumbs up. She said confidently, "I don't believe it either. So I will come back and tell you whether it is true or not after I see it with my own eyes." Chen Pinggan said softly, "Such a strange place. Not everyone can enter it, right?" Ning Yarrow laughed and said, "Who do you think I am?" Chen Pinggan quickly changed the topic, "Miss Ning, please continue to talk about the caves." Ning Yarrow picked up a small and exquisite snake gall stone. It was the color of peach blossoms. She rubbed it in her palm and said, "Any big cave can connect heaven and earth and is full of spiritual energy. That is a true immortal's residence. Chi refinement warriors can achieve twice the results with half the effort if they cultivate in it. The owner of the cave can only be occupied by people with great luck. It has long been divided up by the elites of the 3 sects and 100 families. The 36 small caves are a little like hidden secret realms. It is like a woman hugging a peeper to cover half of her face. Among them, the Peach Garden Cave has the most beautiful scenery, the Astral Wind Cave is the most mysterious and dangerous, and the Dragon Pearl Cave." Chen Pinggan asked curiously, "What is it about here?" The corners of Ning Yarrow's mouth curled up. She stretched out 2 fingers and twirled them gently, saying, "It is the smallest. It is only this big. It is a small place. It is not worth mentioning." Chen Pinggan sat cross-legged. Languid, he leaned on the table. Then, he raised a fist and raised his fingers one by one. He smiled softly and said, "But here I met Mr. Qi, Old Yang, Liu Xianyang, Ji Yu Kan, and of course, you, Miss Ning." Ning Yarrow smiled and said, "But here I met Mr. Qi, Old Yang, Liu Xianyang, Ji Yu Kan, and of course, you, Miss Ning." Ning Yarrow smiled as well. There's also a type of small grotto heaven, which is a place to store items. Buddhists have the saying of Sumeru mustard seed, while Taoists have the saying of heaven and earth in one sleeve. The rest of the schools also have their own sayings. Their motto is that a small piece of land can hold the world. In short, it means that a small item can hold a lot of things. However, compared to a real grotto heaven and blessed land, this kind of treasure with the title of grotto heaven can't hold living things. One of my mother's most valuable dowry was a jade bracelet. The size of the grotto heaven inside is about the size of this house. The straw sandals young man, who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth outside, was a little disappointed. It is so small. Look at the lotus leaf of the Tao ancestor. It is as big as a city. Ning Yarrow was angry. She leaned forward and reached out to slap Chen Pinggan's head. Chen Pinggan quickly leaned back and dodged left and right. Ning Yarrow attacked several times but to no avail. With a thought, she held the peach-colored snake gallbladder stone in her hand and was about to throw the stone. Chen Pinggan hurriedly said in a panic, "Don't throw it, don't throw it. If the corner is damaged, you will definitely lose a lot of copper coins." Ning Yarrow curled her lips and put down the snake gallbladder stone. However, she suddenly raised her hand again. Chen Pinggan was so frightened that he quickly closed his eyes. He could not bear to watch. With a bang, the stone slammed heavily on the table. Ning Yarrow held her stomach and laughed. After Chen Pinggan opened his eyes, he said helplessly, "Miss Ning, can you not be so childish?" Ning Yarrow raised her long and narrow eyebrows. With a sweep of her elbow, the stone was swept off the table. Chen Pinggan scratched his head with both hands with a bitter expression. It was impossible to reason with Miss Ning. Ning Yarrow giggled and stretched out her other hand from under the table. The stone that should have fallen to the ground was lying in her white palm. Chen Pinggan still hugged his head with both hands, looking pitiful. Ning Yarrow stopped teasing Chen Pinggan and asked seriously, "What do you want to do in the future?" Chen Pinggan thought for a moment and answered honestly, "After helping Master Wan with the manual labor, I want to burn charcoal in the mountains. I can also pick herbs and sell them to the Yang family shop." Ning Yarrow hesitated for a moment and asked, "Then other than the mountain-moving ape in Zhengyang Mountain, there is still the woman from the Shu family in Qingfeng City, Liu Zhimao, Yunxia Mountain and Old Dragon City behind Cai Qinqian and Fu Nanhua. What will you do? If they want to cause trouble for you, where will you run to?" Ning Yarrow did not wait for Chen Pinggan to speak and said in a low voice, "That is why Master Lu told you to stay in the blacksmith shop shamelessly no matter what. It is the right path." Chen Pinggan said worriedly, "What if I cause a lot of trouble for Master Wan?" Ning Yarrow sneered, "Why would a saint who presides over the operation of a small grotto heaven be afraid of such trouble?" Chen Pinggan nodded, "Then I will ask Master Wan later and tell him the truth. Let's see if he is still willing to accept me as a long-term apprentice." Ning Yarrow supported her chin with one hand and picked up the snake gallstones with the other, saying, "In this small town, there is nothing that a bag of gold and copper coins can't solve. If there is, then 2 bags. Chen Pingan said with a sad face, "My heart aches." Ning Yarrow squinted and said, "Why didn't your heart ache when you planned to give it all to Liu Xianyang?" Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "It's 2 different things. It can't be compared." Ning Yarrow rolled her eyes and said, "In the future, if any woman is unlucky enough to be your wife, I think she will want to slap you to death every day." Chen Pingan said seriously, "If I really have a wife, it will be another matter. I am not stupid to let my wife be wronged." Ning Yarrow's face was full of disbelief and sarcasm. The charcoal-like young man crossed his arms and sat cross-legged. He had a rare arrogant look and snorted, "If my wife is wronged, not to mention the elder ape of Mount Shenyang, even that Tao ancestor you mentioned, I will kill him. Let's not talk about whether I can kill him or not. Anyway, I will kill him first." Ning Yarrow was very surprised and dumbfounded. She had always felt that Chen Pingan was not a stubborn person. Of course, except for killing Cai Qinqian and fighting the mountain-moving ape, Chen Pingan seemed to never get angry. He was not bigoted and had a mild temper. Ning Yarrow would not be surprised if such words came out of the mouths of geniuses like Fu Nanhua and Song Jisin. However, when it came out of Chen Pingan's mouth, Ning Yarrow could not believe it. She could not help but ask, "Why?" Chen Pingan grinned and said, "My father only fought once in his life, and it was for my mother. Because someone scolded my mother in the dragon riding alley, my father was angry and went to fight fiercely. When I came back, I was grumbled by my mother for a long time. But my father privately told me that whether I can beat her or not is one thing, but whether I can beat her or not is another. What's the point of marrying a woman instead of protecting her?" Ning Yarrow was puzzled. Chen Pingan scratched his head and said with shame, "My father is good at burning porcelain, but he is not good at fighting. When he came home, his face was bruised and swollen. He was beaten badly." Ning Yarrow held her forehead and did not want to speak. She was silent for a moment and got up. "Let's go back to the shop." Chen Pingan asked, "Do you want me to walk you to the entrance of Mud Bottle Alley?" Ning Yarrow said in a bad mood, "No need." Chen Pingan did not insist and only walked Ning Yarrow to the door. Ning Yarrow did not turn her head. She knew that the youth had been standing at the door. The hearts of good people who were not pedantic would be especially warm and bright, like flowers and trees in the sun. This in itself was a very beautiful thing. The youth in Mud Bottle Alley, who had no one to rely on, was called a lowly bumpkin by those outsiders, an ant who dug up dirt in the city's shabby alleys. However, the youth had his own life to live. He also wanted to live a good life, not because he was greedy for pleasure. In fact, the youth was a child who could bear hardships since he was young. He simply thought that if his parents knew in the afterlife, they would definitely be relieved. Although Chen Pingan was the only one left in the Chen family, he could still live a good life alone. This meant that the family passed down from his parents was not bad, even if there was only one person left in the family. Even if he had the money to buy the couplets, the youth had to put them up by himself. No one would tell Chen Pingan if they were crooked or not. The Fu character on the door needed to be put up by himself, and no one would help him. People were responsible for their own life and death. They did not want to ask for anything from the heavens. Therefore, although this kind of person seemed to have a good temper, he was actually very stubborn. His life was also very stubborn. The girl who walked out of Mud Bottle Alley suddenly felt a sense of loss and guilt. She left without saying goodbye. After Chen Pingan returned to the house, he stared blankly at the oil lamp. In a daze, Chen Pingan seemed to be asleep yet not asleep, dreaming yet not dreaming. He seemed to have inexplicably walked to the south end of the covered bridge. He only vaguely remembered that it was dark all the way, and even he could not see a few feet away. However, as soon as he stepped onto the stairs, a bright light suddenly shone between heaven and earth. Chen Pingan walked on the covered bridge in a daze. Suddenly, a dazzling snow-white light bloomed in the middle of the corridor. It seemed to be more dazzling than the light of heaven and earth before, and the Tao it contained was more sublime. Chen Pingan was in so much pain that his eyes were tearing up, but for some reason, he could see the strange scenery more clearly. There was a tall figure with a blurred face standing in the middle of the covered bridge. He looked somewhat similar to Mr. Chi, whom Chen Pingan first met in the alley. His sleeves were fluttering, and he was dressed in snow white. He looked like a god or an immortal. However, in his chaotic subconscious, Chen Pingan was very sure that the person in front of him was even more illusory than Mr. Chi. It was as if he or she was further away from the mortal world. Chen Pingan walked forward slowly. He seemed to hear the whispers of a charming woman, bewitching him. "Kneel down, and you will have good luck." After that, another person shouted in a dignified manner, intimidating everyone, "Commoners, why aren't you kneeling down yet?" Then, a calm voice said, "Common people need to kneel down to heaven and earth. Kneel down, and you can reach the top of the great path." There was also a hoarse voice that said, "Kneeling down is equivalent to crossing the longevity bridge, climbing up the azure cloud ladder, and crossing the chasm between heaven and earth. Don't hesitate. Kneel down. If you don't accept the gift, you will be punished." A familiar voice sounded out, "Chen Pingan, stop right there. Don't move forward, don't turn around, and don't kneel down. Just stay where you are for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. How much divine chi and will can your mortal body bear? Don't go against heaven's will." It was a bit like old Yang's reprimand and warning. However, the old man's voice became lower as he spoke. At the same time, someone smiled warmly and said, "Chen Pingan, why don't you stand up straight and try taking a few steps forward?" That sounded like Mr. Chi. Chen Pingan instinctively straightened his back and stopped. He looked around blankly. He only knew that he had a lot of questions to ask Mr. Chi. Many noises rose one after another. "This is Ma Kushwan's opportunity. Get out of here, you brat. Even if Ma Kushwan can't get it, it should fall into the hands of the immortal Ning Yao. Who do you think you are? Your branch of the Chen family is a pile of mud that can't be raised. You should have died out a long time ago. How dare you covet the divine item, you shameless bastard. Chen Pingan, don't you care about Ning Yao and Liu Xianyang a lot? Turn around and go back to the town. Isn't it better to leave the opportunity to your friends? Qi Jingchun has already used his death in exchange for the safety of you mortals. You can be a rich man in the future, get married, have children, and have a next life. Isn't that great? If you dare to take another step forward, I'll burn your bones to ashes." Chen Pingan took a step forward. The covered bridge shook with a loud bang. The world was silent, and the noise disappeared. There were sighs, fear, panic, awe, and sighs. It was a mess. After Chen Pingan took a step forward, he naturally took a second step forward. At this time, he realized that Mr. Chi was walking side by side with him. The entire covered bridge, as well as the area outside it, suddenly became pitch black. When the young man stopped, he was no longer shedding tears because of the light. Now, he suddenly choked with sobs for no reason. He asked, "Mr. Chi, are you leaving?" "Yes, I'm leaving. There are too many people outside who want me to die. It's not up to me to make a choice." "Mr. Chi, who are we going to see?" "It's not us, it's you. You're going to see an old man." There was a loud bang. Mr. Chi seemed to have been hit by someone, but Mr. Chi laughed heartily. In the end, he didn't forget to say in a deep voice, "Chen Pingan, the great path is under your feet. Let's go." Chen Pingan took a deep breath and raised his foot, ready to take the third step. A voice that sounded very far and very high instantly penetrated the layers of heaven and earth. It smiled and said, "Don't do things more than 3 times. Don't overdo it." Someone snorted in the middle of the covered bridge. Chen Pingan suddenly woke up and found himself lying on the table. The oil lamp was still burning. The young man subconsciously turned his head to look out the window. It was dawn. Reading. 71. Chen Pingan walked out of the house in a daze and came to the small courtyard. He looked up and saw the scorching sun in the sky, making his vision particularly clear. The sky was like a porcelain embryo that had shed layers of glaze, bright and clean. Chen Pingan inadvertently felt that his breathing was a little stagnant. He sat on the threshold and held his breath, his fingers forming the sword furnace fist stance. 30 minutes later, Chen Pinggan finally felt that his breathing had stabilized. Just as he was about to stand up, he caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eye. He sat back down on the threshold and stared with wide eyes. A black stone was lying quietly in the corner of the courtyard. It was the best whetstone in the world, the dragon-slaying platform. Chen Pinggan hurriedly got up and walked over. Squatting down, he carefully examined the statue. Compared to the collapsed statue of the heavenly official, this statue was like a piece of tofu, cleaved cleanly in two with a single slash. Chen Pinggan rubbed his chin and moved his position bit by bit. He changed his position and squatted in a circle. When he returned to his original position, he was more certain that this was the platform under the foot of the statue of the Bodhisattva. This caused Chen Pinggan to feel a chill run down his spine. Although Miss Ning liked to speak big words, her cold and indifferent words were absolutely not false. When she said that the beheading dragon platform was abnormally firm, it could only be broken by the great sword immortal at a great cost. Chen Pinggan believed this without a doubt. Then did this dragon-slaying platform grow legs and run all the way to Chen Pinggan's house? Chen Pinggan already knew that there were immortals and ghosts in the world, and there were countless mandrill spirits. However, the possibility of a stone becoming a spirit was not high, right? Besides, it could enjoy some happiness in anyone's house. What could it do other than suffer in his house? Was there such a stupid stone spirit? Chen Pinggan asked tentatively, "Hey, can you talk? Or can you understand me?" "Of course not." The suspicious teenager shook his head. He could not get enough of it. Perhaps it was because the dream was too real that Chen Pinggan had not recovered from it yet. Everything he saw now was strange. Many small things that he hadn't thought deeply about back then seemed to make sense when strung together now. Mr. Qi said that there were indeed such things in the world, and Ning Yarrow even said that the outside world was grotesque and variegated. Even Old Man Yarrow had already said a lot of things. It was a simple matter of entering the mountain, but there were many things to pay attention to. Old Man Yarrow had said a lot before. For example, those inconspicuous old tree stumps could be the seat of the mountain god, and they could not sit on them. He also said that all the mountains in the world, no matter how big or small they were actually of the same origin. The only difference was that there were grandfathers and grandsons. At this moment, Chen Pinggan was suddenly very curious. He wanted to know how he could see the entirety of Lizhu Grotto Heaven, where the town was located. Could it be that the only way to have a clear view of the mountain was to climb to a higher peak than Mount Covering Cloud? Chen Pinggan collected his thoughts and lowered his head to look at the black stone. He wanted to move it to the blacksmith's shop. Miss Ning would definitely need this whetstone. As for how Miss Ning would deal with the stone, whether she would choose to sharpen the sword herself or give it to Master Wan as a thank you gift for helping to forge the sword, Chen Pinggan did not care. He was just curious about how the whetstone would sharpen the sword. Would it be similar to sharpening a hatchet? Chen Pinggan never hesitated when doing things. After making up his mind, he immediately moved. He stretched out his hands and lifted the whetstone a little more than an inch off the ground. It was a little heavy, but not impossible to move. This was easy. Chen Pinggan went to the house and found a wicker basket. Soon, the teenager walked down Clay Bottle Alley with the wicker basket on his back. He covered the whetstone with a shirt. After walking out of Clay Bottle Alley, Chen Pinggan found that there were many people on the street. He guessed that the sudden dark night made people panic. Now that they finally saw the sun, they wanted to come out and take a breath of fresh air. Therefore, most of the townspeople left their houses and walked out of the alley to the street. They were talking about it. From time to time, people rushed by, shouting that the iron lock well had completely dried up. Even the iron chain that had been hanging in the well for thousands of years had been secretly taken away by some bastard and hidden at home. There were even young children that wished for the world to be in chaos. They were jumping about in groups of 2 or 3 with excited expressions on their faces, and they were talking about the unexpected event that occurred on the old locust tree. It turned out that the old locust tree had been uprooted overnight and fallen on the street. The ground was covered with broken locust tree branches and withered locust tree leaves. At first, many people nearby felt that it was a waste, so they picked up the branches and leaves to burn at home. Some tired and lazy young men were urged by their aunts to chop the thicker locust tree branches with their hatchets. It was not that no one stopped them. Most of the old people in the town who had lived around the old locust tree for generations were heartbroken. They directly scolded the men and women who took advantage of the old locust tree. There were also some old people who tried to persuade the old locust tree about the origin of the town. They said that the tree had spiritual chi. For so many years, even the withered branches would only fall in the dead of night and would not fall on people's heads. Not to mention that every time the harvest was bad, the locust tree's flowers were like rice and filled many people's stomachs. It did not work. Those young men either ignored them and buried themselves in cutting the tree. Those with bad tempers had conflicts with the old people, pushing and shoving. In short, it was a bit messy. After hearing the movement by the old locust tree, Chen Pingan hesitated with the basket on his back. He slowed down and looked back every 3 steps, looking in the direction of the old locust tree. His intuition told him that he should go to the locust tree to take a look, but there was another voice in his heart that told him to hurry to the blacksmith shop. He suddenly saw a nimble figure pass by him like the wind. It was a little girl wearing a red cotton-padded jacket. What made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that the little girl was carrying a locust tree branch that was as thick as a young man's arm on her shoulder. The locust tree branch was as long as a person. The little girl's footsteps were as fast as the wheels of a cart. She was very lively and playful. Chen Pingan recognized her at a glance. She was the little girl who came and went like the wind. She liked to wander around the town. She and Ji Kan were people who got to know each other through fighting. Not long ago, they met each other on the back of the green ox. They met once. She was following those immortals and seemed to have a good relationship with that young Daoist nun. Chen Pingan even gave her a small snake gall stone. Chen Pingan hurriedly called out to her. The little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket turned her head. When she saw that it was Chen Pingan, she grinned. Her pair of limpid eyes seemed to be saying, "If you have something to say it quickly. I'm listening. I'm still busy with moving ants." Chen Pingan held back his laughter and waved his hand. "I have something to discuss with you. At most, I'll take up a bit of your time." The little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket ran over with the branch on her shoulder. She turned her body slightly and raised her head. She was somewhat puzzled. Chen Pingan asked, "You moved this branch from the old locust tree, right?" The little girl nodded vigorously and said regretfully, "If I didn't move faster, it would have been snatched away. I'm weak and can only move such a big branch. I'll try my best to make a few more trips." Chen Pingan's mind raced. He probed, "If your house is on Fulu Street, then it's quite far. If you trust me, you can put the locust tree branch in my courtyard first. That way, you can make a few more trips." The little girl silently weighed the pros and cons. While she was seriously considering, she had been observing Chen Pingan's eyes and expression. She probably felt that Chen Pingan didn't have any bad intentions. She nodded and said, "Then what do you want me to do?" "I'll say it first. I can't carry a branch that's too big. It's very heavy. Right now, my shoulders feel like they're on fire." Chen Pingan took out a bunch of keys. He took one of them and handed it to the little girl. "This is the key to my courtyard. Take it. I don't need you to do anything else. When you're snatching the locust tree branch, I just want you to see if there are any yellow leaves on the ground. If there are, remember to help me put them away." She didn't take the key. Her eyes widened. "That's it." Chen Pingan smiled. "Yes, that's it. You know where my house is, right?" She grunted. Counting from the left of Mud Bottle Alley, it's the 12th house. In the end, she still didn't take the key. "The wall of your courtyard isn't high. I can put the locust tree branch in gently. There's no need to open the courtyard door." Chen Pingan had just put away the key when the girl in the red cotton-padded jacket turned around and ran away. Chen Pingan felt that she was like him in the mountains. She walked through the streets and alleys, while he climbed over the mountains. Chen Pingan walked out of the town and headed south. When he approached the covered bridge, he was shocked to find that it had disappeared. It had returned to the old stone arch bridge in his memory. For some reason, Chen Pingan still liked the old bridge in front of him, even though it was brand new and had a bright golden plaque hanging on it. Chen Pingan stood at the end of the stone bridge. For some reason, he thought of that inexplicable dream. He took a deep breath and slowly walked up the slope. The closer he got to the center of the bridge, the more nervous Chen Pingan became. He was already sweating profusely, but when he reached the end of the arch bridge, nothing happened. Chen Pingan laughed at himself and quickened his pace toward the blacksmith shop. On the other side of the blue ox back, old Yang sat on the edge of the blue stone cliff, smoking tobacco in big mouthfuls. The pool under the old man's feet rippled and sparkled. Under the surface of the water, there seemed to be a lot of water plants swaying. Under the sun, there was an indescribable sense of eeriness. On the surface of the water, a blurry old woman's face gradually appeared, but she had a head of black hair that bloomed in the water. At this moment, the old woman looked as if she had lost her parents. She said in a trembling voice, "Great Immortal, I really didn't dare to go near there last night. I tried a few times, but every time I went, it was like diving into a pot of oil. It was worse than being sliced into pieces. Great Immortal, please forgive me. There was nothing I could do." Old Yang said coldly, "I'm not here to condemn you. You'll be the same in the future. Just do what you can and don't be careless. But now there's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in front of you. It's up to you whether you dare to fight for it." The old woman's green face swayed with the water, and there was an indescribable sense of eeriness. Hearing that the Great Immortal intended to show her a way out, she quickly put on a posture of listening attentively. The old man said slowly, "Now that the small cave has slowly returned to the human world and is connected to the earth, it's in the critical period of taking root. Soon, it will be connected to the territory of the Dali dynasty. The reason why you can only be called River Granny and not River Deity is that you're still an unranked official in the secular dynasty. You haven't really obtained an official position. One step is the difference between heaven and earth." He pointed at the stone arch bridge with his pipe. "The reason for this is not because your territory is small, but because your territory has been cut in half. Do you see that bridge? It's the bridge that cut off your future. Now, as long as you can swim under the bridge, you'll have a great future. The stream you're in will become the source of many important rivers in the future. Not to mention a lowly river deity whose hair is only a few hundred miles long, it won't be difficult for Dali to confer the title of river deity with hair that is a few thousand miles long." The old woman's eyes turned slightly. Old Yang didn't urge her. He smiled and said, "It's actually quite comfortable to lie in the mud, right? Why do you need others to help you up, right?" The old woman didn't dare to agree because she was afraid. Now that she heard the Great Immortal's sarcasm, she knew something was wrong and immediately begged for mercy. The stream in the deep pool suddenly surged. The old man was indifferent. He said indifferently, "Whether you continue to be a loach wagging its tail and begging for mercy or become a river dragon guarding the water fate, it all depends on this. Also, don't forget what I told you at the beginning. There's no turning back on this road. You can only go to the end. There's no good thing in the world that can be done once and for all. To put it bluntly, anyone in the town can have good karma, but it won't be your turn." The more the Great Immortal was so calm, the more nervous the old woman was. Finally, she gritted her teeth and quickly dived into the water. After a while, the old woman's figure disappeared. But in the stream between the back of the green ox and the stone arch bridge, there seemed to be a green shadow that was crookedly swimming downstream. When the shadow approached the stone arch bridge, it slowed down. In the end, it was like a turtle swimming in the water. When it was more than 10 feet away from the deep pool of the stone arch bridge, the old woman's figure suddenly accelerated. Obviously, she was going to risk her life to seek riches and fortune. She swam past. She was unimpeded. After the old woman rushed out for more than 10 feet in one breath, her figure in the water spun. In order to celebrate her survival, she couldn't help but spin in circles. A mass of black hair wrapped around the skinny body that had no flesh and blood. The old woman stood straight in the stream and looked up at the stone arch bridge. Finally, she saw the old sword clearly. It was still rusty. It was no different from what she saw when she was a child, a young woman, and a young woman. But at the next moment, Hippo's eyeballs exploded on the spot after taking one more look at the old swordsman. She wailed. The stream was rolling and waves were bursting. After a long time, the stream finally calmed down. The old woman had a pair of eyes again, but her breath became weak. The voice of the great immortal sounded in her ears, "He doesn't care about you. That's because your ancestors are green. Don't push your luck. When you pass by the stone bridge in the future, remember not to look up." The old woman stammered, "I won't. I won't do it again." Old Yang's voice came faintly, "You just go downstream and try to swim to where you can go. When you pass by the blacksmith shop, don't be too arrogant. But don't worry too much. Your existence can make this stream particularly gloomy. Once the water essence is produced, it will be good for the forging of swords. So, Master Wan won't make things difficult for you. If you work diligently, they might even give you some opportunities out of charity. Although the Pearl Grotto heaven is broken and the spiritual energy is flowing quickly, it can probably last for 30 to 40 years. Master Wan's position as a saint is very stable. For him, it's a good thing." The old woman was relieved and said flatteringly, "I will obey the great immortal's decree." On the side of the green ox's back, someone's words were full of admiration. "Senior, you are so powerful. You can actually confer the title of Granny He. The key is that you can still not disturb the heavenly Tao." Old Yang still maintained his original sitting posture. He did not turn his head and sneered, "Granny He and River God are just one word apart. How can a scholar like you not understand?" The person who came was the biggest scholar of Lakeview Academy, Kui Ming Huang. He should be the last outsider to leave this place. The spirited and handsome scholar smiled and said, "It's already very shocking. To forcefully create a small path on a broken path, this junior can't help but admire this kind of skill." Old Yang asked indifferently, "Kid, you know my identity?" Kui Ming Huang shook his head and smiled, "The Hill Master didn't tell me in advance, but I can guess a little." Old Yang said impatiently, "Go away, you're not qualified to talk to me. Your Hill Master is more suitable." Kui Ming Huang did not leave. Instead, he sat on the ground on the green ox's back. Before sitting down, he did not forget to reach out and carefully hold the jade pendant at his waist to prevent it from hitting the stone cliff. He looked up at the blue sky that was no longer obstructed and said softly, "He has a great cultivation base, but in order to protect this Pearl Grotto heaven and prevent the heavenly Tao from penetrating, he was unwilling to use any of it. In the end, he could only rely on the 2 words natal to hold on until the end." "Old Mr. Yang, what do you think our Mr. Chi is after?" The old man just smoked with a gloomy expression. Kui Ming Huang murmured, "If he's after a life for the people, it's too much of a loss. His Qi Jing Chun, the Hill Master of the Cliff Academy and the proud disciple of the 4th sage of Confucianism. Is it worth it to exchange his life for the next life of 5 or 6,000 ordinary people? I don't think it's worth it. If it were me, I would definitely not do it." Old Yang exhaled a mouthful of smoke, "You can only nag me like this. Otherwise, you'll never be the Hill Master of the Academy in your life. Since you've said a few words, why don't we have a chat?" The scholar smiled and said, "That's great, I can't ask for more." The old man looked at the water, "But before that, I'd like to ask you a question." Kui Ming Huang nodded and said, "Just ask, senior." The old man said slowly, "Step by step, you forced Qi Jing Chun into a situation where he could only beg for death. Was it your doing?" Kui Ming Huang was stunned at first, then he smiled bitterly and said self-deprecatingly, "Senior, aren't you overestimating me?" Old Yang did not turn his head. Clouds of smoke rose in front of the old man. "I'm not good at other things, but I'm good at reading people's minds. So you shouldn't have come here." Kui Ming Huang explained with a smile, "Even if it's a little later, it's been 80 years since I, the 4th sage of Confucianism, fell from my position in the Confucian temple for the first time. I'm only 30 years old now, how can it be reasonable?" The old man turned his head and said with a smile, So you're saying that you just happened to come here to take the nation-guarding jade tablet and happened to run into this tragedy? You're saying that if you're not a piece of Sha**T, you're still Sha**T? Kui Minghuang looked calm and said with a smile, nothing is constant in the world. There's no story without coincidences. Old man Yang chuckled with a fake smile on his face. Kui Minghuang did not want to waste any more time, so he went straight to the point. I have a special liking for Mount Biyun and hope to build a new academy there. I'm a guest here and should do as the Romans do. It's only right for me to greet you, Senior Yang. What's your request, Senior? Old Yang frowned and did not say anything. Kui Minghuang did not dare to rush the old man. He stood up slowly and said softly, Senior, don't worry. As long as you don't agree, I won't dare to start building my academy. If you think it's feasible one day, you can ask the Kill Supervision Office to send a message to Kui Minghuang of Lakeview Academy. Old Yang nodded and did not reject him. Kui Minghuang bowed and left. Compared to a small chess piece like Hepo, whether Lakeview Academy could become a god or not depended on whether they could find a place to play Go in the Dali dynasty. They chose Mount Biyun. In fact, the old man did not care too much about it because it did not matter. The only thing the old man cared about was what Qi Jingchun said to Ron Jiao at the covered bridge that night. In the end, he sat alone on the covered bridge for the whole night and only returned to the town after dawn. During that time, what did Qi Jingchun say and do? The old man stood up with his pipe and scolded in a low voice, none of them are easy to deal with. In the school, the four children looked at each other in confusion. The children did not see Mr. Qi. Instead, they saw the old man who seemed to be sweeping the floor all year round. He changed into a Confucian robe similar to Mr. Qi's with a jade pendant hanging on his waist. His white hair was neatly combed and he wore a laurel on his head. The old man sat in Mr. Qi's seat and told the four children that Mr. Qi had resigned as a teacher and the hill master of the academy. Therefore, he would be the one to lead the school trip. Mr. Qi and the children had already agreed to go on a long trip, and the elders in their families had also agreed to it. The old man was no longer as kind and dignified as before. He asked, "Where's Li Baoping? Why didn't she come to school?" The sneaky Li Huai, who usually did not get along with the red cotton-padded jacket, immediately told the old man. Li Baoping heard that the old pagoda tree had fallen on the way here. She wanted to join in the fun. I couldn't stop her. She has a bad temper. I tried to persuade her, but she didn't listen. She even wanted to beat someone. The other three children cursed silently. Li Huai was really like his mother. His ability to lie through his teeth was better than anyone else's. The old man turned to a little girl with a ponytail and said, "Go and ask Li Baoping to come back. We're leaving the town today." The little girl said, "Oh." She stood up reluctantly and trotted out of the school. Li Huai was young, but he had a sharp tongue. He did not forget to add fuel to the fire. He said like an old man, "Old Ma, Li Baoping is such a naughty student. You must discipline her well. Otherwise, she won't be successful. Since Mr. Qi is not here, Old Ma, you have to take up the responsibility." The old man glared at him sternly. Li Huai was so scared that he kept quiet out of fear. He just kept cursing the old man in his heart. When the tiger is not in the mountain, the monkey is the king. In the past, Li Huai was tired of Mr. Qi's rules. Now, he missed Mr. Qi's kindness. Next to the school, in the room that belonged to Qi Jingchun, Kui Minghuang of Lakeview Academy sat behind a desk and looked around. The scholar who had taken over the place smiled faintly. He whispered in disappointment, "There aren't many books." When Chen Pinggan arrived at the blacksmith shop and heard the news, he was a little confused. Ning Yarrow left the town before dawn. Ruan Xiu said that she was at the inverted hanging mountain. She sent a letter by flying sword. Miss Ning left the shop in a hurry after hearing about it. Only then did Chen Pinggan know that Miss Ning went to Mud Bottle Alley to say goodbye to him. Chen Pinggan stood under the eaves of Ning Yarrow's temporary residence with a wicker basket on his back. He pursed his lips. Ruan Xiu said softly, "Miss Ning asked me to tell you that she'll be borrowing the scabbard for a while. She'll return it to you later." Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, "It's okay. Ruan Xiu wanted to say something but stopped. Chen Pinggan realized that it was meaningless to say this to Miss Ruan. He scratched his head and said, "Then I'll go back to Mud Bottle Alley first." Ruan Xiu nodded. Chen Pinggan walked forward. Ruan Xiu suddenly remembered something and shouted, "Chen Pinggan, my father said that you'll be working in the shop for a while. He might need you to help him forge in the future." Chen Pinggan turned his head and said with a smile, "Thank you." The girl in cyan smiled sweetly. Chen Pinggan walked alone by the stream. When he reached the stone arch bridge, he suddenly stopped and took off the basket on his back. He sat on the edge of the stone bridge with his feet hanging in the air. The wicker basket that contained the heavy dragon beheading platform was beside him. A pair of straw sandals swayed gently. The youth wasn't too sad about Miss Ning's departure because he knew from the beginning that she would leave. But there were some things that he didn't have time to say. After an unknown period of time, Chen Pinggan was suddenly awakened by a huge splash under the bridge. Chen Pinggan hurriedly turned his head. The wicker basket was gone. Chen Pinggan didn't hesitate at all. He supported himself with both hands and let himself fall into the stream. After entering the water, he quickly changed his position in the water and drilled into the bottom with his head down. When Chen Pinggan opened his eyes and vaguely saw a bit of light, he lost consciousness in that instant. The next moment, Chen Pinggan found himself standing on a mirror-like water surface. He gently stamped his feet and created ripples, but the mirror surface didn't collapse. Chen Pinggan suddenly raised his arm to cover his eyes. There was a dazzling light in front of him that illuminated the world. When the light faded, Chen Pinggan put down his arm and saw a person sitting in the air in the distance. One of his legs was bent and the other was hanging down, as if he was sitting on the edge of a cliff. His posture was lazy. His whole body was bathed in the pure white light. Strands of light were constantly swaying. Chen Pinggan couldn't see the person's face clearly. It was very similar to the person who stood in the middle of the covered bridge in the dream in Mud Bottle Alley. But Chen Pinggan couldn't be sure if it was the same person. The person raised his head and yawned. He slowly said, "That scholar called Qi Jingchun said that he was very disappointed in this world. What about you?" After the person spoke, Chen Pinggan had difficulty breathing and gritted his teeth. Soon, he heard his heartbeat again. It was like someone was beating a drum. The youth's face was red and he reached out to cover his heart. The gods beat the spring drum to inform the world that spring was coming. If the drum didn't sound, spring wouldn't come. The person waved his hand and his sleeves swayed like the Milky Way. On the stone arch bridge, the young man who was pecking at rice woke up in a daze. He turned his head and saw the basket placed beside him. The young man held his head and said, "Again?" Chen Pinggan slapped himself hard. It hurt. He stood up in a panic and ran away with the basket on his back. Chen Pinggan ran all the way back to Mud Bottle Alley. He opened the gate and found that there were many locust tree branches lying around. He thought that the girl could really run and carry. Chen Pinggan put down the basket and sat at the gate of the courtyard, wiping his sweat. A touch of red ran over from the other end of Mud Bottle Alley. The little girl was sweating profusely. When she saw Chen Pinggan, she grinned. She leaned on the locust tree branch and panted. She fished out a handful of bright green locust tree leaves from the embroidered bag at her waist. Chen Pinggan took it and looked down. Compared to the locust tree leaves that Mr. Qi took him to ask for, these locust tree leaves were also green, but the veins of the leaves were withered and yellow. After looking at them for a long time, he couldn't see any green luster swimming in them. Chen Pinggan looked at the red cotton-padded jacket who was looking around. He smiled and reached out his hand. The little girl was confused. Chen Pinggan didn't take back his hand. After a while, she took out the last locust tree leaf from the embroidered bag and slapped it on Chen Pinggan's palm. Chen Pinggan continued to reach out his hand. She puffed up her cheeks and turned around to take out another locust tree leaf. She handed it to Chen Pinggan with a sad face. Chen Pinggan held back his laughter and put the 8 locust tree leaves together. He took out 3 of them and handed them to the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket. He said softly, "This is for you." The little girl didn't take the locust tree leaf. Her big black grape-like eyes were full of confusion. Chen Pinggan rubbed the little girl's head and explained gently, "It's different if you hide it first and I give it to you later. Don't forget that you must keep your promise to others." Chen Pinggan looked at the innocent and young face and smiled. "If you try hard and still can't do it, remember to tell me." Although the little girl felt that what he said was quite reasonable, she felt embarrassed. So she used all her strength to wrinkle her little face and said angrily, "Why do you look so much like Mr. Chi? I don't like you anymore." Chen Pinggan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "I'll help you move the locust tree branch to your house. I'm strong. One trip is enough." The tired little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket's eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled and said, "Then I can like you for a while longer." 72. Although Chen Pinggan looked thin and weak, when he carried the locust tree branches on his shoulders and walked easily in Mud Bottle Alley, the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket was stunned. If she hadn't insisted, Chen Pinggan would have taken the locust tree branch on her slender shoulders as well. A little girl with a ponytail stood at the entrance of Mud Bottle Alley. Her cheeks were probably frostbitten in the winter, as her cheeks were very eye-catching. When she saw the girl in the red cotton-padded jacket carrying the locust tree branch, she said sullenly, "Li Baoping, didn't you say you would leave the locust tree branch behind and go to school with me? You don't know, but Grandpa Ma is very strange today. He's wearing the same clothes as Mr. Chi and said he would take us on a study trip to Cliff Academy. If Grandpa Ma gets angry at us, it's your fault." The girl in the red cotton-padded jacket didn't listen at all. She picked up a green locust tree leaf that Chen Pinggan gave her from the embroidered bag at her waist, and twirled it in front of her peers proudly. She had an expression that said, "You don't have it, but I have a lot of it." The little girl with the ponytail only felt that it was strange. She didn't know what was so good about showing off a broken leaf, but she just couldn't stand Li Baoping's look. She was asking for a beating. The problem was that the children of the same age in the school, even a troublemaker like Li Huai, couldn't beat Li Baoping. Li Huai had once been beaten by her until he lay on the ground and pretended to be dead. Li Baoping didn't give up. She took off Li Huai's trousers and threw the trousers up a tree, hanging it high up there. Naked, Li Huai cried all the way back. His mother wasn't someone easy to deal with. Without saying anything, she dragged Li Huai and charged towards Fulu Street. In the end, before they reached the Li family, the woman saw the majestic stone lions, painted door gods, and tall courtyard walls on both sides of the street. She was so angry that she gave Li Huai another beating. She didn't even knock on the door of the Li family's house before pulling her son's ear and sneaking back to the dilapidated house on the west side of the town. However, that night, the woman slaughtered a chicken and stewed it. Li Huai stood on the stool naked, swaying back and forth, eating more happily than anyone else. He didn't even remember the embarrassing incident where Li Baoping pressed him to the ground and smacked his head. The little girl with ponytails stretched out her hands and gestured with her hands, her face full of disdain. "It's just a locust tree leaf. What's there to be proud of? My father gave me a golden abacus last night. An abacus made of gold is this big." It was a pity that the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket was completely immersed in her own world. She didn't care about the golden abacus at all. She continued to wave the locust tree leaf lightly in front of her companion. She lifted her pointed chin and pointed at Chen Pinggan in front of her. "He gave it to me. I have more in my bag." The little girl with ponytails sighed. From the first day she met Li Baoping, she had always been this annoying. She only said what she wanted to say, only listened to what she wanted to hear, only did what she wanted to do. If it weren't for the fact that there weren't many people of the same age in Dragon Rider Alley, the little girl with ponytails wouldn't have been willing to play with her. Many times, even Mr. Chi was helpless against Li Baoping. Li Baoping would always ask strange questions, but Mr. Chi would always answer seriously. Unfortunately, he often couldn't give an answer that would convince Li Baoping. Sometimes, Mr. Chi would excitedly think of a question and planned to teach Li Baoping well the next day. In the end, Li Baoping would forget what she had asked yesterday. Once she thought of fishing for loaches, catching crickets, or flying kites, she would run away, leaving Mr. Chi to the side. Chen Pinggan carried the locust tree branches on his shoulders and couldn't turn his head. He could only ask in a slightly louder voice, "How many people are there in the school right now?" Li Baoping was struggling to change her shoulders to carry the locust tree branches. She had changed back and forth many times before, and it was burning with pain. The girl with ponytails reached out a hand and answered, "Now there are only 5 people left. Me, Li Baoping, Li Huai, Lin Shuyi, and Dong Shuijing." She had nothing to do, so she told him the situation of the school in one breath. Mr. Chi promised to take us on a study trip, and we were going to study at Cliff Academy in the end. At that time, there were still 14 or 15 people in the school, and our families all agreed. Later, these rich kids who mostly lived on Fulu Street and Peachleaf Alley said that they were sick and didn't come to school. Later, I heard from Li Baoping that they directly left the town, saying that they were going to seek refuge with distant relatives. When they heard that they were going to Cliff Academy, this group of people was the happiest. I don't even know why they were so happy. They had to follow Mr. Chi for such a long journey. Weren't they tired? The little girl's voice was childish, but her words were clear. She was precocious and had a gentle temperament, like a little adult. Chen Pinggan couldn't help but think of Ji Kan. However, she was like a snotty hedgehog, so she was still a little different. Chen Pinggan smiled and asked, "Then what's your name?" The little girl with 2 ponytails said indifferently, "Me? My name is Shi Chuanjia, so you can call me Miss Shi." Chen Pinggan was speechless. Li Baoping undermined him and said, "You can call her little Shi Tu." Shi Chuanjia was like an angry kitten. She angrily said to Li Baoping, "You're not allowed to call her little Shi Tu." Li Baoping, "You can't call her little Shi Tu either." Li Baoping, who liked to let her imagination run wild, had already shifted her thoughts from the nickname of her little friend to something else. Therefore, she didn't pay attention to Shi Chuanjia's rebuttal. Shi Chuanjia, on the other hand, had a serious personality. She tirelessly tried to reason with Li Baoping just to get rid of the unlikable nickname Little Shi Tu. This was because Shi Chuanjia knew that in the future, when she went to Mr. Chi's Cliff Academy, as long as Li Baoping called her Little Shi Tu even once, then she would probably never be able to get rid of this nickname. Listening to the 2 little girls behind him talking back and forth, Chen Pinggan asked when they approached Fulu Street, "There are many houses with the surname Li on this side of Fulu Street. Where is your house?" Chen Pinggan thought that as long as it wasn't the house of one of the 4 major surnames, it would be fine. After all, in order to lure the elder ape of Zhengyang Mountain out of the mountain, he used the locust tree on Fulu Street to climb up the wall of the Li residence. Speaking of which, Chen Pinggan also used a slingshot to break 2 of the Li residence's bird food jars. Shi Chuanjia said in a bad mood, "Huh? It's the house with the locust tree outside the wall." In the past, every time her family didn't let her go out because they were afraid that she would play around, she would secretly climb up the wall and land on Fulu Street along the locust tree. Once, her parents were so angry that they moved the ladder away and insisted that she enter through the gate. Unexpectedly, she directly jumped down. After that, she didn't come to school for a month. For the next 2 months, she always came with crutches. Li Baoping didn't feel that it was shameful. Instead, she said in a serious manner, "I reflected on it afterwards. That time, my landing posture was wrong. I shouldn't have stuck my feet straight down. So after my legs recover, I'll try again," Shi Chuanjia said in a huff. "Isn't it just another half a month off from school?" Li Baoping curled her lips. "Won't it be fine after the 3rd time?" Shi Chuanjia said angrily, "That's because after a year, your body will grow very fast. That's why you can withstand the torment. It has nothing to do with your landing posture." Chen Pinggan didn't get involved in the quarrel between the 2 girls. First, he was having a headache. If the Li family recognized him, they would close the door and let the dog out in anger. Second, Chen Pinggan envied them in the depths of his heart. He envied their happiness and stability. They had elders at home to control them and could study in school. Although he had a headache, Chen Pinggan still decided to help Li Baoping and send the locust tree branch to her door. This was probably karma. He had just told the girl in the red cotton-padded jacket that he had to keep his promise. In the end, He could only bite the bullet and walk into the Lee family's mansion. Perhaps the heavens had finally woken up from their nap and felt that it was time for Chen Ping'an's luck to change. The gatekeeper didn't recognize him and Li Baoping didn't ask him to help her carry the locust tree branch into the mansion. Chen Ping'an was just about to turn and leave when Li Baoping handed him the locust tree branch on her shoulder, saying that it was her repayment. Chen Ping'an didn't refuse the girl's kindness. He casually carried it on his shoulder and waved goodbye. The gatekeeper was already used to his young Miss's strange temper. He wasn't surprised that she carried a bunch of locust tree branches that were disliked for burning. He only felt a little heartache for his young Miss's red cotton-padded jacket. It was much more valuable than the locust tree branches. When this young lady was not even 5 years old, she could go to the stream and catch a big crab by herself. When she got home, she cried and raised her little hand high. There was a crab on her little hand that was unwilling to let go of its pincers even if it was dead. This made her parents and the old ancestor feel very distressed. Until now, that crab with a greenish-black shell and crimson-red pincers was still in her big fish tank. His young miss really didn't like to study and would chat with it whenever she had nothing to do. Looking at Chen Ping'an's departing figure, Shi Chuanjia glanced at Li Baoping beside her and chuckled. "So it's him who caused you to lose a front tooth?" Li Baoping suddenly walked behind Shi Chuanjia and held her 2 ponytails with both hands, preparing to pull them up. "Trust me, it will definitely work this time." Shi Chuanjia was so scared that she quickly squatted down and closed her eyes. She waved her hands randomly above her head to prevent Li Baoping from pulling her ponytails up again. Li Baoping squatted next to her, who was shorter than her, and confidently said, "Little Shitu, it won't hurt. You haven't tried it a second time, so how do you know it won't work? Am I right?" Shi Chuanjia was so scared that she burst into tears. The gatekeeper couldn't bear it and helped the shopkeeper of the shop in Dragon Rider Alley. He said, "Just now, a student, Mr. Ma, asked Li Huai to pass on a message to the residents to prepare a carriage. Young miss, you should take your luggage and go to the school first. Then, you will leave the town and travel with Miss Shi to Cliff Academy. Of course, before going to the school, young miss can go to Dragon Rider Alley and put Miss Shi's things on the carriage." Li Baoping could only let Shi Chuanjia go for now. Her face was full of disappointment. When they walked through the gate together, she didn't forget to feel sorry for Shi Chuanjia. The little girl with ponytails, who had survived the disaster, silently decided that she would take off her ponytails today. "Hey!" Li Baoping suddenly exclaimed and raised her head. Shi Chuanjia followed her gaze and wondered, "It won't rain." A large black cloud floated over the town. From north to south, the straw sandals youth, who had just walked out of Fulu Street, also raised his head to look. At that moment, the youth was so shocked that he couldn't speak. How was that a black cloud? It was clearly a dense cloud of flying swords in the sky. Countless immortals were flying in the sky on their swords. The youth slowly turned his neck and his gaze followed the cloud of swords heading south. All of a sudden, a black dot went from south to north, going in the opposite direction of the flying sword immortals. That black dot grew bigger and bigger. In the end, the straw sandals youth with excellent eyesight widened his eyes as if he had seen a ghost in the day. In the sky above the town, there was a person on a flying sword that slanted downwards. When he was about 1,000 feet away from the town, he stopped for a moment. The person on the flying sword looked down at the town and scanned the surroundings. Then, he rushed down towards Fulu Street. In the blink of an eye, he flew thousands of miles on the flying sword. With the sound of wind and thunder breaking through the air, he finally landed in front of Chen Ping'an. The sword hovered half a foot above the ground. On the sword, there was a heroic girl in a dark green robe. Her feet were also hovering on the sword. The travel-worn girl grinned and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She said heroically, "I felt that I should say goodbye to you, so I came." But before the youth with the locust tree branch could say anything, the girl with the sword at her waist changed the direction of the sword. It slanted upwards and disappeared in a flash. The youth subconsciously reached out his hand, but the girl and the flying sword had already disappeared. The embarrassed youth resentfully withdrew his hand and scratched his head. He walked towards Clay Bottle Alley, looking up from time to time. The straw sandals youth was a little disappointed at first, but he soon cheered up. It turned out that Miss Ning was an immortal. So much so that when Chen Pinggan passed by a shop in Dragon Riding Alley, he spent money for the first time and bought a stick of candied haws. He ate as he walked. As he ate, the youth didn't know why, but he felt a little empty. The youth thought carefully. Was it because he felt sorry for the copper coins? 73. Chen Pinggan ate the candied haws that he had not tasted for nearly 10 years and returned to Clay Bottle Alley with a locust tree branch. When he passed by a house that was even more dilapidated than his own ancestral house, he felt guilty and wondered if he should borrow some money from Master Wan to repair this house. Although he had lived in Clay Bottle Alley since he was a child, Chen Pinggan had never seen anyone living in this house. Previously, when he was chasing and fighting with the mountain-moving ape on the roof, he deliberately tricked it to come here and caused the old ape to stomp a big hole in the roof. Chen Pinggan felt that he had to take responsibility for this mess. Otherwise, he would inevitably suffer from the wind and rain in the future. Perhaps the house could last for 20 or 30 years, but now it might not even last for 5 years. The house's pillars would decay very quickly. In this aspect, it was very similar to Chen Pinggan's body that was forcibly guided by Cai Qinqian. They were both in a state of leaking. Therefore, Chen Pinggan became more and more anxious and thought that he had to repair this ownerless house no matter what. Although it was not glamorous, it could not run away from being sturdy and strong. Chen Pinggan had thought of taking out a gold fine copper coin and exchanging it for real gold, silver, or copper coins with others, such as Old Yang of the Yang family's shop or Master Wan of the blacksmith shop. However, Chen Pinggan had an intuition that gold fine copper coins were really hard to come by. Every time one was used, there would be one less. As for silver and copper coins, they could be earned anywhere. It was just a matter of effort. Therefore, Chen Pinggan decided to borrow some from Master Wan first. If he could not borrow it, he would use the gold fine copper coins to solve the problem. Chen Pinggan was certainly distressed. However, since some urgent problems were clearly in front of him, he could not pretend that he did not see them. He was very afraid of owing others. Chen Pinggan returned to the courtyard and placed the locust tree branch that the little girl had given him against the courtyard wall. The priceless whetstone was still in the basket, but of course, he would not throw it in the courtyard so openly. He had already asked Chen Pinggan to move it into the house. If it was not for the fact that time was pressing, Chen Pinggan would have dug a 10 feet deep hole in the courtyard and buried the inconspicuous but valuable whetstone. Just by hearing the name of the dragon beheading platform, one could feel that it was even more precious than the 3 bags of gold fine copper coins. Chen Pinggan heard the sound of chickens crowing in the courtyard next door. When Song Jisin and GQ left town, they did not take care of the old hens and chicks. They were probably starving. Chen Pinggan went to the house to pick up the bunch of keys and a handful of rice from his house. He walked to the courtyard next door, opened the chicken coop, and squatted down to feed the chickens. After feeding the chickens, Chen Pinggan opened the door to the kitchen to see if there were any leftover grains, so as to prevent them from rotting. But when he entered the kitchen, Chen Pinggan's horizons were broadened. There was a large vat of rice. Just by opening the lid, Chen Pinggan was full. There were pots, bowls, ladles, and basins in the cupboard. There was even a row of ham and dried fish hanging on the wall. Everything was clean and tidy. Everything was neat and tidy. Chen Pinggan was suddenly attracted by a pair of firewood near the stove. He approached and squatted down. Sure enough, it was the wooden figurine that he saw Shigui using a kitchen knife to chop. She didn't know how to chop firewood at all, so even after chopping for a long time, she had little effect. If it were Chen Pinggan, he would be able to chop a wooden figurine that was about the height of a person into pieces. At this moment, Chen Pinggan squatted down and looked down. He found that the wooden figurine was very strange. There were many red dots engraved on its body, scattered all over its body. Some places were densely packed together, while some places only had a single cinnabar-like red dot at a distance. Chen Pinggan picked up a wooden figurine's arm and looked carefully. Beside each red dot, There were actually extremely small ink characters. The red dots were originally the size of rice grains, so the strokes of those small characters were even finer and indiscernible. Fortunately, it was Chen Pingan. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably only see them as red dots and black dots. Chen Pingan tried to put the broken limbs back together. Not long after, the wooden puppet returned to its original shape. Fortunately, the wooden puppet did not lack any big parts. Unfortunately, many of the places where the red dots and black words were pieced together had been cut off or scraped away by GQ's kitchen knife. It was estimated that there were only about 70 to 80% of the relatively complete ink characters left. Chen Pingan got up and opened the window to let the light in the kitchen become more transparent and bright. Only then did he continue to squat down and look carefully. He did not dare to miss any details. It took almost 2 hours. Although Chen Pingan did not know most of the ink characters, he still tried his best to remember the structure of their strokes. Chen Pingan had always had expectations for learning to read and write. When Chen Pingan was working in the kiln, there were many times when he climbed to the top of the mountain and looked at the town from afar. Other than looking for the direction of Mud Bottle Alley, the second place he wanted to know was the school. When he was young, there was a dark and thin child who often went to the school. He would squat against the wall and listen to the sound of books above his head. Although he did not understand what was said, the child would inexplicably feel at ease and calm. His heart would be very calm and the grievances he suffered throughout the day would disappear as he listened. However, for the orphans of Mud Bottle Alley at that time, studying was much more luxurious than Candid Hawes. It was good to just look at it from afar. At this time, Chen Pingan closed his eyes and based on his memory, he constructed a complete wooden puppet in his mind. If there were parts that were vague in his memory, Chen Pingan was not in a hurry to open his eyes to check the truth. He skipped over them first. As a result, from the beginning to the end, there were about 40 to 50 uncertain ink characters on the wooden puppet. After identifying and memorizing those omissions one by one, Chen Pingan took a deep breath and wanted to do it again. However, as soon as he closed his eyes, his head swelled and he felt a little dizzy. Chen Pingan decisively did not force himself to do it. Some efforts were not enough to be made with great effort. Otherwise, it would only make things more chaotic. After Chen Pingan learned how to burn porcelain, he had a deep feeling about it. It was not because he was talented, but because he was scolded by Old Man Yarrow all day long. Chen Pingan rearranged the wooden puppet and piled it in the corner of the stove. After walking out of the kitchen and closing the courtyard door, he thought about it and decided to go to the east gate of the town to look for the gatekeeper again. After he became an official apprentice of the blacksmith shop, he would most likely live there. It was unlikely that he would be able to deliver letters. Therefore, Chen Pingan wanted to say hello to the bachelor. However, he had looked for him once before and did not find him. Chen Pingan trotted to the east gate of the town. The yellow mud house was still locked and the door was still closed. He sighed and sat on the stump where the gatekeeper, Zheng Dafeng, often Saturday. The town was not like the mountain, so there was no need to pay attention to the mountain god seat. Chen Pingan sat there in a daze. It was rare for him to take a break from work. After an unknown amount of time, the sound of wheels could be heard on the road in the town. Chen Pingan turned his head and looked. There was an ox cart at the front, followed by 2 carriages with carriages. On the ox cart sat a group of children. There were also 2 familiar faces, Li Baoping in a red cotton-padded jacket and Shi Chuanjia with 2 red cheeks. Other than that, they must be the 3 apprentices that Shi Chuanjia had mentioned, Li Huai, Lin Shuyi, and Dong Shuijing. The 5 children on the ox cart were chattering away, and it was very lively. The driver was an unfamiliar middle-aged man. The old man who had swept the floor of the school sat behind the driver. Chen Pingan looked around. Other than the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket who came from one of the 4 major surnames of Fulu Street, the other 4 children were dressed differently. Shi Chuanjia's ancestors had lived in Dragon Rider Alley for generations, guarding the old shop called Sui Sui. They did not have to worry about food or clothing, but they could not be considered wealthy. Therefore, the little girl's clothes could only be considered comfortable and warm. However, Beside Shi Chuanjia was a cold-looking peer of the same age, draped in a brand-new black fox fur coat. His face was slightly pale, and his eyes were cold. Li Huai's father, Li was a well-known good-for-nothing in the town. Li Huai also had an older sister named Li Huai. However, his parents and the three sisters had all gone out to make a living, leaving only Li Huai alone in his uncle's home. Now, he was also leaving his hometown, following the old man surnamed Ma to the Cliff Academy. The last young man was wearing a thin spring shirt. He was wearing 2 outer shirts that were sewn and mended. He looked like a poor child who grew up in a poor alley. Li Baoping, Shi Chuanjia, Li Huai, Lin Shuyi, Dong Shuijing. The 5 children from the small town rode on an ox cart that could not shelter them from the wind and rain, heading towards the Holy Land in the hearts of countless scholars in the Eastern Bottle Continent, the Cliff Academy, one of the 72 academies of Confucianism. At this moment, the 5 children definitely did not know that on the continent that was filled with dynasties, countless generations of rich and powerful families wanted to send their children there no matter how hard they tried. They wanted to learn from the Confucian sages, rule the country, and bring peace to the world. Naturally, they also did not know how rare it was to be able to call Qi Jingchun Mr. On the contrary, these children only felt that Mr. Qi was too well behaved. He often had a straight face and was not approachable at all. Mr. Qi occasionally smiled. The children did not even know what they did to make him so happy. Li Baoping's sharp eyes saw Chen Pinggan sitting on a tree stump. She jumped off the ox cart at lightning speed, staggered, and ran to Chen Pinggan. She suddenly stopped in front of him, but did not seem to know what to say. In the end, she only stuck out her chest and said, "I want to go to a place very, very far away." Her little face was full of pride. The old man wearing a laurel hat said in a deep voice, "Li Baoping." Although the old man was not very happy, he still asked the driver to stop the ox cart. The little girl curled her lips, but she still turned and ran to the ox cart. She suddenly heard the guy behind her call her name. When she turned around, she saw him waving his fist at her and shaking it lightly. He was probably telling her to work hard. Li Baoping also waved her fist at him, indicating that she would work hard. Chen Pinggan smiled knowingly. He felt that the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket's efforts were mostly used for playing. Her footprints would be left everywhere in Cliff Academy. Chen Pinggan looked up and saw the old man who was sweeping the floor a few times at the school. The old man nodded at him. Chen Pinggan subconsciously smiled and saluted back. At the same time, someone in the carriage behind them gently lowered the curtain. Although it was only a glimpse, Chen Pinggan saw the person's face clearly. It was the scholar who went to the blacksmith shop to find Master Wan. Chen Pinggan watched the ox cart and the carriage slowly leave the town. If Chen Pinggan could fly on his sword like Ning Yarrow and look down at the thousands of miles of mountains and rivers that had just taken root, he would definitely be shocked by the various strange phenomena. Countless birds and beasts of all kinds were entrenched on the border between Dragon Pearl's cave and Great Li's territory. Even further away, there were countless of their own species that were madly rushing towards this place, as if they were absorbing something. On the invisible border, they dared not take a step forward, nor were they willing to take a step back. There was also an old woman standing at the end of the stream within the border. Her upper body was above the water, and her black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. It spread around her body like a black lotus. The old woman whose face was originally mottled like a withered tree's bark now looked like a woman in her 40s. There was also the cloud-covered mountain, which seemed to be arched by the ground and was slowly rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. The grotto heaven was shattered and reduced to a blessed land. In the past, the people of Liju Grotto Heaven, whether rich or poor, good or evil, all of them had a next life. 74. Chen Pinggan returned to the blacksmith shop. After working, Chen Pinggan took advantage of the meal break to find Master Wan, who was squatting under the eaves with Miss Wan. Chen Pinggan said that he wanted to borrow 15 or 16 taels of silver. Ruan Qiong didn't even ask Chen Pinggan why he wanted to borrow money. He put down his chopsticks, glanced at the straw sandals youth, and said, "Get lost." Chen Pinggan quickly ran away. Ruan Xiu frowned and said, Father, can't you talk nicely? Ruan Qiong snorted and said, it's good enough that you didn't beat him up. Ruan Xiao stood up for him and said, he worked so hard to be your apprentice, but you didn't even take a single cent of his salary. When it was dark, everyone was either sleeping or chatting in their rooms. Only Chen Pinggan was still moving soil from the well. He was busy with this and that and didn't rest at all. Father, don't you know who was the most diligent during this time? Touch your conscience and ask yourself, how is it too much for him to ask you to borrow 15 or 16 taels of silver? Ruan Qiong's face darkened and he didn't speak. He thought, I know too well, that's why I want to kill this little bastard who tried to poach me. If this youth had the cultivation and ability of the mountain-moving ape of Zhengyang Mountain, his father would have learned from Qi Jingchun and beaten him half to death. However, Ruan Qiong was a little discouraged when he thought of this. Even if he didn't have the identity of a saint in this world, it was still certain that he could defeat the mountain-moving ape. However, it was obviously impossible to win with a kick like Qi Jingchun. Ruan Qiong could only comfort himself. Although he was nominally a sword cultivator of the military school, his real pursuit was not to be strong or weak in battle. Instead, he wanted to become one of the best swordsmiths in the world. He wanted to forge a living sword that had the hope of nurturing its own spirituality, so that there would be another real living being in the world who could live and die, cultivate, reincarnate, and even pursue the Great Way. Ruan Qiong put down his bowl and chopsticks, looked up at the sky, and cursed inexplicably, do you really think that you can be lawless after Qi Jingchun died? I've already told you my rules clearly. Now that you don't follow them, show me the ability to not follow the rules. If you don't, then go to hell. Seeing that there was no one around, Ruan Qiong, who was originally squatting, rose up from the ground like a snow-white rainbow and shot into the sea of clouds in the sky. Above the sea of clouds, there were a few women in palace attire and a man in brocade robes and jade belts. They were walking together in the sky, talking and laughing. All of them were elegant and unrestrained immortals. From time to time, they would overlook the entire land of the former Liju cave heaven. It could be said that they were living up to their name. There was a loud bang. The head of a dignified woman with a golden hairpin burst open. Then, a beautiful girl beside her also had her head split open. Ruan Qiong's figure hovered above the golden sea of clouds. His eyes were sharp as he looked around and sneered, "What? You're testing my bottom line with these small fries. Aren't you looking down on me too much? I, Ruan Qiong, may be a blacksmith and can't compare to Qi Jingchun, but what's so difficult about killing 1 or 2 blind cultivators from the 10th floor? Then, from now on, there's one more rule. Everyone, listen up. Even if you're hiding outside the border and coveting Liju blessed land, if I, Ruan Qiong, am in a bad mood, I'll still catch you above the blessed land and smash your head. Believe it or not, it's up to you." Ruan Qiong had just finished speaking when he flashed out of the border. The next moment, he pressed down on the head of an old man with one hand and pulled him back into the border. He pressed down with his 5 fingers, and the old man begged for mercy, "Master Ruan, Master Ruan, let's talk nicely. I'm from the nearby Purple Mist River." Without waiting for the old man to finish, Ruan Qiong crushed the immortal master's head and threw the corpse out of the Blessed Land's territory. However, Ruan Qiong only glanced coldly at the green rainbow that escaped from the corpse. He didn't beat the dog when it was down. The green beam of light, which was less than 3 feet long, crazily flew for nearly 1,000 miles before plunging into a great river that was wreathed in a faint purple mist. The river water was so grand and magnificent that it was far superior to the great rivers in Great Li's territory. Ruan Qiong, whose 5 fingers were still stained with blood, said loudly, "Within 60 years, everything will be the same." In the distant sea of clouds, a female cultivator used the clouds to hide her figure. She said angrily, "Such bloody and cruel methods. How is this the work of a saint who presides over a land's fate?" Ruan Qiong was so angry that he laughed. "Oh, you've learned to be smart. You're hiding so far away before muttering. You think I can't do anything to you? Damn it, I'm not Qi Jingchun, that stupid guy who studied too much. You're talking about morals and etiquette with a military sword cultivator like me? Is there something wrong with your head?" Ruan Qiong tilted his arm down and put 2 fingers together. He chanted in his mind, "Heavenly spirit wind, earthly fiend thunder pool fire, urgent command." In an instant, 2 auras surged rapidly in the sky and on the ground, like 2 springs that had just appeared in the world. Another gentle voice hurriedly warned, "Oh no, it's Ruan Qiong's natal wind and thunder sword. Lan Ting, retreat quickly. Ruan Qiong's natal item is different from ordinary people. It's not nurtured in his acupuncture points. It exists in the world within 3,000 miles around him, following his 2 yin gods of the military school everywhere." Above the sea of clouds, there was a streak of colorful green firefly that was desperately trying to escape. Outside the firefly, there were translucent peach blossoms hovering around, protecting their master. After this streak of green light had almost traveled 800 miles in a single breath, a green thread descended from the sky and pierced through its head. The man who had spoken up for her had already used his unique escape technique to vanish when he saw that the situation was bad. The sky fell silent. No one dared to make a noise anymore. Ruan Teng sneered and no longer bothered with this group of evil people. His figure landed by the stream near the blacksmith shop. The blacksmith, who was covered in a murderous and bloody aura, reached out his hand to wash away the bloodstains in the stream. Ruan Qiong sighed and said sadly, "Qi Jing Chun, if you were half as unreasonable as me, would you have left in such a sullen state?" On the shore, Chen Pinggan was in the middle of 2 hours of stump walking. On his way back, he had just finished his practice and was relaxing his muscles and bones. Chen Pinggan suddenly saw Master Ruan walk up the bank from the stream. He hesitated and slowed down, not wanting to be rebuffed. For some reason, Chen Pinggan felt that Master Ruan did not have a good impression of him. The way Master Ruan looked at him was a little similar to Old Man Yarrow's, filled with disdain. Ruan Qiong ignored the young man and strode back to the blacksmith shop on his own. Chen Pinggan suddenly turned his head and looked at the stream. It was calm as usual, nothing out of the ordinary. However, Chen Pinggan's heart suddenly tightened, as if there was a blade on his back. It was like a water ghost who had died unjustly in the stream was staring at him. It was a very preposterous feeling. However, in his line of sight, the stream gurgled cheerfully and gently. Chen Pinggan did not give up. He picked up a few stones of just the right weight and turned around to walk downstream along the stream. He carefully observed the movements in the stream, trying to find some clues. The more Chen Pinggan looked, the more he felt that something was wrong. In broad daylight, the stream gave off a gloomy feeling. Even though Chen Pinggan had dived into the deep pit under the green ox's back so many times, he had never felt such a clear sense of annoyance. Chen Pinggan could now be sure of one thing. There were unimaginable demons and wandering ghosts in the world. In the past, Mr. Qi was in the small town, so no evil could invade. Now that Mr. Qi was no longer there, perhaps there were ghosts and spirits everywhere. He had to be careful. Even if Master Ruan was the next so-called sage, Chen Pinggan did not dare to let his guard down. After all, Chen Pinggan still trusted Mr. Qi more. He definitely revered the unsmiling Master Ruan, but he did not want to get close to him at all. The reason why Chen Pinggan dared to follow his instincts and take the initiative to investigate the strangeness in the stream was that Master Ruan had just left. Chen Pinggan did not think that if there were really ghosts in the water, they would dare to come out of the water to kill him under the nose of a sage. Besides, Chen Pinggan now had the seal of landscape that Mr. Qi had given him hidden in his sleeve. One of them was the water seal, so the young man was particularly brave. After Chen Pinggan threw 2 handfuls of stones, he was about to bend down to pick them up when someone not far away asked, "What are you doing?" The girl was wearing a green dress and had a ponytail. It turned out to be Ruan Xiu. Chen Pinggan had been concentrating on dealing with the water and did not notice Miss Ruan's approach. He was not afraid that she would laugh at him, so he pointed at the surface of the stream and answered honestly, "I feel that there is something dirty in the water, so I was wondering if I could use stones to smash it out." Ruan Xiu looked at the stream and focused on it. Her face darkened. Chen Pinggan asked, "Is there really a problem?" Ruan Xiu shook her head, "I can't see it." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "I should be the one being overly suspicious." Ruan Xiu whispered, "You go back first. I want to eat something here before going back to the shop." If my father asks, just say that you didn't see it. Chen Pinggan nodded and said, no problem. He remembered something and found a sharp stone on the ground and asked, Miss Ruan, can I ask you what these words mean and how to read them? Ruan Xiao suddenly felt like she was facing a great enemy. Reading. Books were the most terrifying enemies in the world. Ruan Xiao had a headache every time she saw a random page of a book. Originally, after she followed her father into the town, she should have gone to school to study. She did not have to help forge iron and swords at all. However, she would rather die than go. Today, her stomach hurt. Tomorrow, it might rain, and the day after tomorrow, she might sprain her ankle. Ruan Xiao was too lazy to listen to those lame excuses, so he let Ruan Xiao go. However, Ruan Xiao did not want to show her fear in front of the young man today. She forced herself to be calm and forced a smile. Try writing first. When Chen Pinggan carved the 2 words on the ground with a stone, Ruan Xiao's body changed. She was in high spirits and said confidently, these 2 words are too simple. I've known them since I was very young. The word Shen and the word Ting together are the name of the acupoints of the human body. Shen Ting is the so-called acupoint. The reason why we humans are the leader of all creatures and many demons who have cultivated the great Tao have no choice but to transform into humans is that the human body is the most suitable for cultivation. The 365 acupoints of various sizes are all treasures like mountains of gold and silver. The ancients have said that the acupoints are the places where the divine qi flows in and out. Our 3 souls and 6 spirits are like children who eat a bowl of rice in one family and a bowl of water in another family. Then, they are constantly nourished and grow stronger. Ruan Xiao explained. Then, she stretched out a finger and pressed it against her head. She smiled and said, as for the divine court, it's right here. Stroke the hairline above your head and look up 5 centimeters. This aperture point is not very important for sword cultivators like me and my father. Well, in our words, it's not a place that the military will fight for. It's dispensable. But for those who rely on incense to survive, this aperture point is very important. But my father said that those gods and ghosts are not very promising. No matter how powerful their divine powers are and how wide their ghost path is, they are just poor creatures living under someone else's roof. They are not worth mentioning. Chen Pinggan did not understand any of it and could only memorize it. He then asked about the words Duke and Taiyuan respectively. Ruan Xiao also answered them one by one. Although she did not like to read, that was only because she did not like the classic books of the Confucian sages. She was very fond of military cultivation and swordsmanship. She had memorized the names of these acupuncture points since she was young. Before Chen Pinggan could ask for help, the girl laughed loudly and said, when I have time in the future, I'll tell you the names, positions, and uses of the 365 acupuncture points. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, I'll have to trouble you, Miss Ruan. Ruan Xiao asked, I've asked you to buy pastries for me so many times. Do you think it's troublesome? Chen Pinggan shook his head. It was nothing. Of course it was not troublesome. Ruan Xiao smiled happily and said, that's it. She suddenly felt a little regretful and said, things like acupuncture points don't mean much even if you know them. The reason why there are so many unorthodox and crooked ways in the world of cultivation is that each person has a different way of cultivating and refining qi. The slightest difference can lead to a great loss. Of course, my family also has its own 2 great mantras of dispersing and cultivating qi, but it can't be taught to outsiders. This is not a matter of whether my father agrees or not. Chen Pinggan, I'm sorry. Chen Pinggan was not the kind of person who would take advantage of others. He quickly explained with a smile, it's okay. I just want to know more words. I didn't think too much. Besides, I have a boxing manual to practice. Just the boxing stance in this manual is already too much for me to practice. How can I be distracted? Ruan Xiao smiled and patted her chest lightly. That's good. Trembling, the scenery here was unique. Chen Pinggan quickly stopped looking at her carelessly. He stood up and said seriously, Miss Ruan, when you're free, I can go back to Mud Bottle Alley later. Ruan Xiao stood up and nodded with a smile. Okay. Chen Pinggan trotted to the blacksmith shop. Ruan Xiu walked down the bank and came to the stream. She first took out a handkerchief and threw a piece of pastry into her mouth. She slowly chewed and savored the aftertaste. When Chen Pinggan arrived at the town, she rolled up her sleeve and revealed the scarlet bracelet. She looked at the clear stream and said in a low voice, "Fire dragon walks on water." The bracelet instantly liquefied. A living creature woke up and struggled and twisted. Finally, it turned into a small dragon wrapped in flames. Its head and tail were connected and wrapped around the girl's wrist. The girl in green gave the order. The scarlet dragon, which was less than a foot long, leaped into the stream. 3 feet, 3 feet, 10 feet. The fire dragon could also walk on water. Ruan Xiu ordered, "It's done." The fire dragon that was 10 feet long stopped growing. However, all the water in the stream evaporated. Not only that, the water in the upper stream was like defeated soldiers who were scared out of their wits. They did not dare to charge forward and gathered together, causing the water level of the stream to rise while the water in the lower stream continued to rush forward. Ruan Xiu squinted her eyes and looked. She waited for the truth to come out. She walked at the bottom of the dried-up stream and followed the fire dragon that was 10 feet long. Now that the grotto heaven was broken, the restrictions that the 4 saints had carefully set up had disappeared. Therefore, spells and supernatural powers were no longer restricted. This was also the reason why Ruan Ting set the rules and acted so decisively. Even if this place used to be the smallest of the 36 small caves, and it was not good for natural materials and earthly treasures, it was still a blessed land of the origin of the small cave. All kinds of benefits were still greatly beneficial to cultivation. Now, without the restriction of the big tactical matrix, once there was no one to restrain it, the cultivators from the outside world would swarm in. Good and bad people were mixed in, and their intentions were not pure. In the end, except for those old turtles and bastards who were lucky enough to survive, the rest of the more than 6,000 people in the town would probably die within a day. The military school was also very strict with rules. However, they were more flexible than the Confucians. They could act according to the situation and the place. After about half an hour, the fire dragon that had been flapping left and right in the stream seemed to have finally caught the cunning target. It pressed down fiercely with its claw and slowly lowered its head. Ruan Xiu walked to the fire dragon's head and looked down. Under the fire dragon's claw, there was a woman who was curled up. Her waist was grabbed by the claw. She had waist-length hair that protected her body. She asked curiously, "How dare a little river deity behave wildly in front of my house? My father killed 6 river deities in a row. Haven't you heard of it?" Grandma He, who had turned from a withered old woman to a young woman, begged, "Great deity, I'm just passing by. I have no intention of harming anyone. What's more, I boldly revealed my yin spirit aura in hopes of helping Saint Ruan increase the weight of the stream. I just wanted to contribute a little. Great deity, please don't be angry. If you think that I'm ugly and annoying, I'll only dare to wander around at night." Ruan Xiu asked straightforwardly, "Do you know Chen Pinggan?" Chen Pinggan was an orphan in the Mud Bottle Lane. We met occasionally, but there was no grudge between us. I rarely see people from the small town by the stream. Today, I saw the young man practicing martial arts. I was curious, so I took a few more glances. I didn't expect to get into such a big trouble. Great deity, please be merciful to me because I don't know the rules. Ruan Xiu waved her hand and the fire dragon turned back into a red bracelet with ancient patterns. It was worn on the girl's wrist. Ruan Xiu was still standing in the distance. Behind her was the raging stream. However, what happened next made Granny He tremble in fear. As if the stream had met its natural enemy, it automatically turned around and flowed downstream. What was more frightening was that Grandma He could sense that the girl in green didn't use any Taoist techniques at all. Ruan Xiu smiled and said, "Don't be in a daze. Tell me about the Apricot Lane and the Mud Bottle Lane. Tell me everything you know." After regaining her freedom, Grandma He's appearance began to recover. However, the next moment, she couldn't help but scream in horror. It turned out that her waterfall-like black hair was shrinking in length. She said heartbreakingly, Why is my cultivation slipping away? The girl in green ate the pastries and said vaguely, "Ah? I see. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that I was born with the body of fire god, which is the natural enemy of water." Grandma he forced herself to calm down. She cried silently and begged, "Great deity, please be merciful and forgive me for this unintentional offense." Ruan Xiu thought for a while and said, "I will ask you to tell me stories in the future. Don't worry, I will hide my natal breath." Grandma he didn't dare to refuse and had to agree. Ruan Xiu walked to the shore and turned back, just this once. Grandma he said she wouldn't dare. After the girl went ashore, she shook her ponytail and walked to the blacksmith shop. Grandma his body sank into the stream. Her face was full of ferocious resentment. However, after suffering several losses, she began to know how to suppress her anger. A string of thoughts that originated from other people's thoughts resounded heavily in her heart. "Idiot, put away your ignorance. Do you know what the girl's opportunity is? It's to kill all the river gods in the continent. You are just a little grandma he. How dare you have the intention to kill her? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Even if she stretches her neck to let you kill her, you will be the one who dies in the end. Do you know how sensitive she is to any otherworldly item in the water? Therefore, your guess is correct. In the future, the first river god she will kill will be you. Therefore, you should think carefully about how to remedy the situation. This disaster that was supposed to be a calamity is also the seed of a great opportunity for you. This is the last time I'm reminding you. If you do anything that goes against the rules again, I'll make you beg for death without the need for anyone else to do anything." After Grandma his voice disappeared, she floated in the water in a daze. Her body swayed, but she was lifeless. The Great Way was vague and unpredictable, which made people disheartened. Ruan Tian saw his daughter jumping in from the sword-casting room. He said angrily, "Are you happy to bully a useless grandma he?" The girl smiled brightly and said, "Then I will bully her when she becomes the god of the river." Ruan Qi frowned and said, "Xiu, don't underestimate the river god. After all, he is an orthodox water god that is included in the records of mountains, lakes, and seas of a continent. Although he is not as good as the 5 mountain gods of various countries, it is not easy to kill them in the water." The girl said casually, "Then let them have no water to swim in." Ruan Tian was shocked, and then he quickly suppressed the smile that was about to appear on his face. "75. In the dusk, an unfamiliar customer came to the blacksmith shop. The man was about 30 years old. He was tall, had slender eyebrows, and fair skin. His delicate and feminine appearance, coupled with his burly and masculine body, had a different kind of elegance. After Ruan Teng learned of this person's identity, he was not as casual as when he received Kui Ming Huang from the Lakeview Academy. He just chatted with him at the door of the sword-casting room. This time, he asked Ruan Xiu to move 2 bamboo chairs to the corridor and take out 2 pots of good wine, one for each person. The man did not hesitate. He took the wine pot, opened the mud seal, and drank a mouthful of wine. He smiled and said, "Master Ruan, your action this time has shocked the court. I don't know how the court will deal with it, but as the new supervisor of kilns and the first chief officer of Longquan County, I can save a lot of effort. Logically speaking, I should be the one bringing good wine to pay a visit. However, when I heard about the unforeseen event on the way here, I spurred my horse on and really came in a hurry. As for the 2 large jars of apricot wine from the shop in Riding Dragon Alley, just take it that I owe teacher Ruan first." Master Ruan waved his hand and said, "You don't have to say these polite words. If you and I can reach an agreement today, there will be plenty of opportunities to drink and chat in the future. If it doesn't work out, you and I won't have to spend so much effort to win each other's hearts." The man laughed heartily. He did not look like an officer of Dali Imperial Court who held 2 positions. He wiped the corner of his mouth and put the wine pot on his knees. There was no sign of talking while drinking. Mount Jialio was sealed in Dalis Chunhui period. Of course, this is the official statement of the confidential files of the court. According to the local county records, it should be Mount Longji. Halfway up the mountain, There is a natural large-scale dragon beheading platform. Before I came here, there was a meeting between the monarch and the minister. His Majesty said that this thing should be given to Fengshui Temple and Zhenwu Mountain where you are. Both of you can share it. As for how you two military forces excavate, cut, and divide the dragon beheading platform, whether you leave it as an ancestral property or move it back to your respective sects, my Dali Imperial Court will not interfere. It's up to you. If you need Dali to help, such as driving the two young mountain-moving apes under Dali's command to break Mount Jialio and expose the dragon beheading platform, you don't have to be polite. Master Wan said with a smile, Dali is very sincere. Just as the new supervisor was about to say something, Master Wan said, before I came here, the Wind Snow Temple and Martial Mountain had already reached an agreement. Wan Ge, the Wind Snow Temple, and Martial Mountain would each occupy one of the dragon beheading platforms. You should have heard some gossip from your emperor. I plan to establish a sect here, so I've moved my father and daughter identity away from Fengshui Temple. In the next 60 years, it'll be inconvenient for me to officially establish a sect. However, as long as Dali is pleasing to my eyes, once the 60 years are up, I'll choose a passable mountain as the starting point for my sect. The supervisor, who was also the county magistrate, didn't hide the joy on his face at all. As if he was waiting for Master Wan to speak, he immediately said, Master Wan, you can rest assured. Apart from Mount Biyun, there are now 61 mountains in the territory. Master Wan can choose any 3 of them as the foundation for your sect. If Master Wan isn't willing to make a decision in a hurry, I can first show Master Wan the old and new mountain maps of Pearl Paradise. After that, I'll accompany Master Wan to personally explore and inspect the mountains. At that time, Master Wan can make a decision. How about it? It was a great blessing for any dynasty to have a great cultivator like Master Wan to help guard the mountains and rivers. Especially the implication of Wan Jiao's words was that he chose to take root here. He didn't just rely on Dali with the identity of a foreign official, a consecrator, or an imperial tutor. Therefore, it wasn't the kind of situation where people would gather if they got along and leave if they didn't get along. Wan Jiao was really spreading his branches and leaves in Dali's territory. Unconsciously, he was closely related to the fate of the dynasty. Not to mention a small supervisor, even Emperor Dali would be happy if he sat here. There were many warriors in Dali, led by the vassal king Song Jianqiang. The number of masters above the 5 states was the highest in Eastern Vase continent. However, there were very few immortals in the mountains, which was completely inconsistent with Dali's strong national strength. This had always been Emperor Dali's sore point. Ruan Jiao smiled and said, Don't worry about occupying a mountain. To put it bluntly, other than Mount Biyun that you don't want to take out, no other mountain is worthy of my attention. The young supervisor looked a little embarrassed. In fact, before coming here, not only him, but even Emperor Dali and his master also felt that there was a possibility of Wan Jiao establishing a mountain in Dali. However, it was definitely not big because Dali didn't have enough sincerity. Dragon beheading platform? If Wan Jiao didn't have the ability to negotiate with Wind Snow Temple and Martial Mountain and get a share, Dali wouldn't dare to become enemies with Wind Snow Temple and Martial Mountain just to win over Wan Jiao. The price was too high. Even the powerful Dali dynasty couldn't afford it. Ruan Tong suddenly said, although Wind Snow Temple and Martial Mountain have never proposed anything, I personally hope that your Li dynasty can take out 2 divine weapons that are sharp enough. Whether it's a sword or a saber, it doesn't matter as long as it's enough. When the time comes, I can help you hand them over to the 2 military cultivators here and use them to separate the dragon beheading platform. You can report to the Imperial Court first and wait for Emperor Dali's reply. There's no hurry. The young supervisor thought for a while and said in a deep voice, I can make the decision on this matter. I promise Master Ruan first. Ruan Jiao nodded and took a sip of wine. He was quite satisfied with this person's attitude and courage. After all, he would have to deal with this man named Wu Yuan directly for a long time. If he was a stupid person, it would be very tiring. If he was a stingy and timid guy, it would be even more tiring. Wu Yuan hesitated for a moment and took a sip of wine. He seemed to be emboldening himself and said, "Master Wan, first of all, the 30 or so dragon kilns outside the town will be reopened to make porcelain. However, from now on, they will only make ordinary ceremonial vessels used by the imperial court. Secondly, after the newly built county office in the east of the town is built, the county office will post the Dali laws. They will also let the civil servants who are somewhat literate spread the laws around the town. The purpose is to let the ordinary people in the town know that they are the people of Dali." Ruan Jiao's expression was cold. He glanced at the nominal county magistrate of Longquan County, Wu Yuan. The latter explained with a smile, "This is just a superficial effort to deal with the ordinary teachers. In the next 60 years in the town, Master Wan's rules are still the most important. The rules of the 4 surnames and 10 clans follow closely behind. Dalis laws are the lowest. If there is a conflict, this order will be the standard. Dali will not only not interfere with Master Wan's actions within 1,000 miles of the town, they will also stand on Master Wan's side without any suspense. Just like when Master Wan smashed the flesh of the Purple Smoke River cultivator, that person did not repent. He even tried to use his connections in the capital to complain to His Majesty the Emperor. When my teacher heard the news, he did not say anything and sent people to kill the cultivator's nascent spirit." Ruan Jiao frowned slightly and was a bit impatient. "Tell your teacher to stop doing such superfluous things in the future. What does face matter? I'm just a crude blacksmith who is not used to bending the rules. Your Dali is really considerate. It's enough if you give me actual benefits. As for whether I'll accept them or not, that's another matter. That Purple Smoke River cultivator is trash. If I really wanted to kill him back then, would he be able to escape? Even if he had 100 legs, he wouldn't be able to escape. If I really wanted to kill him, how many people in Dali could stop me? Even if they could, would they be willing to stop me?" Wu Yuan's face paled slightly. Her voice was slightly hoarse as she said, "Master Wan, I understand." Ruan Jiao did not want to make things too tense. After all, this was the first time they had met. He could not expect others to do as he wished. That would be forcing them. As a result, he took the initiative to ask, in a secular dynasty, building the Wenchang Pavilion and the Martial Saint Temple, sealing the righteous gods of mountains and rivers, and banning the local obscene shrines are all part of the imperial court's duties. What are your plans for the town? Wu Yuan, who had just suffered a loss, replied carefully, regarding the Wenchang Pavilion and the Martial Saint Temple, our Dali Kintianjian Geomaster has chosen 2 places. They are the Porcelain Mountain to the north of the town and the Immortal's Grave to the southeast. The 2 worshippers are the 2 who left the town back then. One of them happens to be a scholar and the other a martial artist. They have contributed greatly to our Dali. What do you think, Master Wan?" Ruan Jiao's tone was not relaxed. The 2 who enjoy the worship of scholars and martial artists are quite suitable. However, the location has been decided just like that. Have you asked for Master Yang's opinion? Wu Yuan was stunned. She asked cautiously, "Master Wan, may I ask who Master Yang is?" Ruan Jiao was also stunned. He joked, "That Master Xiu who of yours did not even tell you this? He just let you be the supervising official and the parent official? Wu Yuan, tell me honestly, are you in the same situation as Qi Jingchun? Frustrated in the bureaucracy, abandoned as a pawn, and demoted to this place? If that is the case, then I will have to go back on what we agreed on before." Wu Yuan was at a loss for words. She did not know how to explain and was even more confused. Beside a well in the distance, 3 people of the same age were squatting on the ground. Ruan Xiu was teaching Chen Pinggan the names of the acupoints, their functions, and the meaning of cultivation. The extra youth was the one who had shamelessly asked to be taught. At the beginning, Ruan Xiu and Chen Pinggan erased their handwriting and did not speak. The 2 of them stared at him. The youth had delicate features and there was a red mole between his eyebrows that seemed like the finishing touch of a dragon. He had a festive appearance that was very likable. However, both Chen Pinggan and Ruan Xiu had underestimated his patience and shamelessness. They chuckled and looked at the youth with straw sandals to the left and the girl in green to the right. After the three of them had endured for half an hour, the youth seemed to feel that he had also underestimated the perseverance of the two people beside him. He finally took the initiative to speak. Using a smooth and mellow small-town dialect, he said that he had come from the capital and had followed the supervising official here to see the scenery. He especially wanted to see that porcelain mountain. You guys continue to talk about your acupoints and chi palace. Don't be so stingy. What's wrong with me listening? Do you think that I will suddenly become a land immortal after listening? After that, Chen Pinggan and Wan Xiu were busy with their own things and did not pay any attention to this strange fellow's conversation. Your handwriting is not very good. One look and I can tell that you have not worked hard. It is very floating, similar to the oil residue floating on the water. Miss, your explanation is not complete. The so-called boiling the country in half a pot and the drawing that made ghosts laugh is actually like this. Ah, you guys are skipping over the Chi Palace and not talking about it anymore? Ha ha. Miss, why don't you explain to him where the Shanzhong acupoint is? Is it difficult to point it out to him? Sigh, if you are embarrassed, I can help you. Miss, there is a murderous look in your eyes. Miss, you must have misunderstood. What I mean is that I will point out to him where my Shanzhong acupoint is. Miss, your Shanzhong acupoint is difficult to find even for immortals. Why should I ask for trouble? Sigh. Miss, why did you hit people? Again. Miss, I was wrong. Miss, why did you miss the 3 back acupoints? The ancients said that the back acupoint is half the work, shrinking the Zhen and opening the Qianqian is the main work. This shows that it is very important. In the end, it was the appearance of the supervisor, Wu Yuan, that helped Chen Pinggan and Wan Xiu out of their predicament. The talkative youth with a mole between his eyebrows and the taciturn young Dali official left the blacksmith's shop side by side. Chen Pinggan and Wan Xiu sat at the mouth of the well. Wan Xiu glanced at the backs of the two people and said softly, "The older one is an official. The one beside us just now, I am not sure. I also did not feel anything strange. Maybe he is the young man's page boy. Many big families outside have such study companions." Chen Pinggan nodded. Ruan Qiong walked to the side of the well with a straight face and said, "Chen Pinggan, come with me." Chen Pinggan stood up blankly. Miss Ruan had said that her father had agreed to lend him money, but he would have to wait for about 10 days. Did he go back on his word? The girl in green felt a little guilty and followed behind Chen Pinggan. Ruan Qiong sat on the bamboo chair and let Chen Pinggan sit on the chair that Wu Yuan had sat on before. Ruan Xiu coughed and said with a smile, "Father, these 2 chairs were made by Chen Pinggan. They are not bad, right?" Ruan Qiong said with a dark face, "I am talking business with Chen Pinggan." Xiu, don't interrupt." Chen Pinggan quickly sat up straight. "Master Ruan, please speak." Ruan Qiong took out a handful of silver from his sleeve. It was about 3 or 4 taels. Go to the small town's dragon riding alley and buy a pot of good peach blossom spring wine for father. Use the rest of the money to buy some pastries. Ruan Xiu was a little unwilling. Ruan Qiong pretended to put away the silver, then go to the sword-casting room and watch the furnace. It will be finished in 2 hours. Ruan Xiu snatched the money and ran. After his daughter ran far away, Ruan Qiong asked directly, "Chen Pinggan, do you have 3 bags of gold and copper coins?" Chen Pinggan's expression was normal. He nodded and said, "Yes." Ruan Qiong seemed to like the youth's honesty. His expression improved a little. "There is no other small-town citizen like you who has 3 bags of gold and copper coins on hand. Even among the 4 families and 10 clans in Fulu Street's Peachleaf Alley, the Song family has at most 2 bags. Most of them only have 1 bag. In addition, there are 8 small families in the small town that have used their family treasures to exchange for a bag of gold and copper coins. Basically, all of the valuable old items in the small town have been sold. Now, there are about 7 or 8 items left, and they are in good condition. In the future, there will be more and more outsiders in the small town. Of course, your life will not be in danger. The reason why I am being so frank with you is because I hope that you will make good use of the 3 bags of gold and copper coins. Don't let them rot in your hands, and don't casually use them. Before me, the small town would open its doors once every 60 years. About 20 to 30 people would enter the small town, and they would be free to search for opportunities. From now on, there will be no such rule. It will become more and more like a normal small town in Delhi. Therefore, your 3 bags of gold and copper coins are particularly eye-catching. In the end, it will cause you a lot of unnecessary trouble. I am a person who is afraid of trouble. When the time comes, I will inevitably stand up for you. However, I, Ruan Cheong, find it embarrassing to deal with a bunch of brats every 2 to 3 days. Therefore, I will give you a suggestion. Whether you want to listen or not, you can decide for yourself. Before I give you my suggestion, let me make it clear to you in advance. Now is the time when the gold and copper coins are most valuable, but not everyone can spend them. Besides the 4 major families, I am afraid that the 10 major families are no exception. Because Emperor Dali intends to open all the 61 forbidden mountains except for the cloud-splitting mountain and sell them to the major forces and sects that are on good terms with Dali. The price of these 61 mountains varies according to their size. The reason why the outside world is scrambling for them is that now that the great formation of Pearl Cave has been broken, it has been reduced to an existence similar to a blessed land. Although the spiritual energy has been sharply reduced, it is still much more than ordinary mountains. It is not inferior to the mountains guarded by the orthodox mountain gods. Moreover, Emperor Dali has promised to confer a mountain god, 3 mountain gods, and a river god. With so many mountain and river gods guarding this place, the area within a radius of 1,000 miles will still be prosperous and full of spiritual energy after 60 years. Therefore, the business of buying the mountains now is a sure win. Chen Pingan asked, "What if I buy the mountains today and die tomorrow? What will happen?" This question hit the nail on the head. Ruan Tong revealed a smile for the first time. First of all, as long as you work honestly in the small town and behave yourself, you will certainly not die suddenly for no reason. For example, if the mountain-moving ape comes to trouble you again, there is no need to worry about whether the town is broken or not. What Qi Jing-chun needs to worry about, I don't need to worry about. What Qi Jing-chun wants to abide by, I also don't need to worry about. Therefore, I can help you settle it, because at this point, it is a reasonable thing to do. Secondly, the Dali Imperial Court sold the mountains cheaply in order to earn incense from people outside Dali. It is a loss. After agreeing to buy any mountain, within 300 years, even if the buyer dies and has no heir to inherit the mountain, Dali will not take back the mountain without permission and will let it be abandoned. Lastly, I will be the first to get 3 mountains this time. The feng shui will definitely be the best. If you can get a few mountains later, we can be neighbors. If you are unable to open up the mountains to earn money, even if you only borrow the mountains from me for 500 years, you will be able to get dividends every year and enjoy the fruits of your labor. It will be the same for your descendants. This was the riches and honor of a small stream. Many aristocratic families dreamed of it. Ruan Tong did not bother to boast, so he did not expose it. Chen Pingan asked curiously, "Master Ruan, what is the approximate price of those mountains?" Ruan Tong said casually, "The smallest mountain is all alone. Dali Imperial Court named it Zhenju Mountain. The bidding price is 1 gold fine copper coin, but it must be winter jasper coin." Chen Pingan was surprised. "Only 1? Ruan Cheng laughed and said, "It's not a big place. It's called a mountain, but in fact, it's not even close to the word peak. It's just a small hill. 1 winter jasmine coin is not worth it." This is because Dali really can't bid half a gold essence copper coin. Chen Pingan muttered, "It is only 1 copper coin. No matter how small the mountain is, it will belong to us for 500 years. No matter how you think about it, it is worth it." Ruan Tong continued, "Mid-level mountains such as Xuanli Mountain, Dian Mountain, and Lotus Lamp Peak are estimated by Dali to be around 10 to 15 gold fine copper coins. The largest small mountain range and the other 2 mountains, Dry Spring Mountain Range, Burning Incense Mountain Range, and Spiritual Beauty Mountain Range, all cost 25 to 30 gold fine copper coins. This is because there is no one bidding. In the end, what Dali wants is not the bags of gold essence, but the 4 families and 10 clans, as well as their various connections in the Eastern Bottle continent. He hopes that the real moneybags behind them will come out and take the initiative to contact Dali. Chen Pingan frowned. Master Wan, then won't I be in the limelight by taking such a big advantage at this time? Won't people hate me? Ruan Tong laughed. You also have a backer. It is far away, but close at hand. Chen Pingan scratched his head and did not immediately agree. Ruan Tong was not angry at the Fire Grass Shoes youth for not knowing what was good for him. Instead, he said with relief, not bad, you did not get carried away. After you go back to Mud Bottle Alley, think about it carefully and try to give me an answer tomorrow. If you wait too long, there will be changes. I am not bluffing you, it is the truth. After Chen Pingan left the blacksmith shop and walked to the Stone Arch Bridge, he still had not recovered from the shock. The youth used to imagine his future days when he had money. For example, he could eat meat buns and candied haws every few days. He could decorate his courtyard with spring festival couplets, door gods, and the word fortune. He could repair his ancestral house like a house. When he visited his parents' graves, he could bring a pot of good wine, a bag of pastries, and so on. Chen Pingan never thought that one day, he would be able to own one or even several mountains. 76. When Chen Pingan approached the Stone Arch Bridge, he swallowed his saliva and did not dare to move forward. After some hesitation, he continued to go up along the stream. When he reached the narrowest part of the stream, he ran up and jumped over it. Only then did he walk to the back of the green ox. Chen Pingan didn't know that his detour had caused him to miss Wan Xiu. The girl in green was carrying a pot of peach blossom spring wine as she dashed across the bridge. This time, when she was buying wine in the small town, she lowered her head and walked quickly past the shop. She was afraid that her soul would be stolen by those dazzling pastries because she wanted to start accumulating her private savings. Chen Pingan first went to Liu Xianyang's house. He lit the oil lamp and walked around the house with the lamp. After making sure that there was nothing missing, he turned off the lamp and locked the door, returning to Mud Bottle Alley. After passing by the old house with a hole in it, Chen Pingan was relieved. The burden on his shoulders was still there, but it was much lighter than when he left Mud Bottle Alley. Chen Pingan could not help but feel happy. The feeling of having money in his pocket was not bad. Chen Pingan had only seen small pieces of silver in his life. He had never seen heavy silver ingots, let alone gold, which was as rare as the gods. Chen Pingan returned to his ancestral house. After opening the door, he ran to make sure that the courtyard door was really locked. After returning to the house, he carefully lit the oil lamp. The dim yellow light reflected on the cold yellow mud wall. Chen Pingan took out 3 money bags from the clay jar at the foot of the wall. There were spring coin, provision coin, and victory coin. There were 25 gold copper coins, 26 coins, and 28 coins respectively. In total, there were 79 copper coins. Ning Yarrow had roughly explained that these copper coins were an extension of the secular way of spending money. The reason why they were so valuable was that they were rare. Of course, the main reason was that foreigners needed copper coins as a token to enter the town. As for the origin of this unwritten rule, it was a long time ago. Ning Yarrow was not a native of Eastern Baoping continent, so she naturally could not tell the truth. Chen Pingan took out one of each of the 3 types of copper coins and placed it on the table. The winter jasmine was carved with the words Auspicious New Year. It was hollowed out and carved with auspicious clouds. There was an armored deity beating a drum. The victory coin was carved with the 5 poisons, the snake, scorpion, centipede, gecko, and toad. The back, in addition to the words evil warding off in heaven, there was a pattern of a turtle and snake wrapped around a sword. The front of the provision coin was carved with the words works with sincerity, and the back, deities above. There was no exquisite pattern, and the style was the most simple. Chen Pingan picked up a spring coin and looked at it repeatedly. It was hard for the youth to imagine that such a small copper coin could buy the entire Zhanzhou mountain. Chen Pingan knew about the so-called small hill that Master Wan mentioned. When Old Man Yarrow first brought him to the mountains to find soil, they went to the top of Zhanzhou mountain. The soil could be divided into different types, such as weight, fertility, and many other types. What was more complicated was that one had to identify which type of soil was naturally close to water, fire, metal, and wood. There were many ways to do so. Chen Pinggan only learned most of Old Man Yarrow's knowledge of eating soil. At that inconspicuous Zhenju mountain, Old Man Yarrow stomped his feet, then lowered his head and said to Chen Pinggan, who was digging the soil there. The smell of soil was the most abundant here, but unfortunately, the place was too small. It was similar to a person huddling in a corner. If one stuck their head out, they would bump their head, and if one stretched their legs, they would bump their feet. Chen Pinggan gently put down the spring coin and picked up the victory coin. However, he quickly put it down. The youth's face was somewhat gloomy. On the 5th day of the 5th month, the 5 poisons appeared together. The youth's birthday just happened to be on this day. Song Jisin from next door had even said that there were many places outside that saw children born on this day as inauspicious. There was a custom of drowning children directly in the river. Chen Pinggan shook his head and picked up the last piece of the allowance. Then, he wrote a few simple words. Chen Pinggan suddenly remembered something. When he first met Miss Ning, Fu Nanhua, and Cai Qinqian, he remembered that when they entered the small town's gate, each of them had to hand over a bag of copper coins to the gatekeeper. Then in the end, whose hands did these copper coins end up in? Did they end up in the personal pockets of the Dali dynasty's emperor? Chen Pinggan sighed. He did not want to think about the question that he could not figure out even if he cracked his head. He began to calculate in his heart. Master Wan said that a small mountain like Zhenju Mountain only needed 1 spring coin. A medium mountain like Shenli Mountain and Lotus Lamp Peak would need about 10 to 15 copper coins. A large mountain like Dry Spring Mountain and Burning Incense Mountain would need about 25 to 30 copper coins. Chen Pinggan actually only needed to ponder a little before he understood the meaning behind Master Wan's words. Firstly, the Dali dynasty respected Master Wan a lot, so they gave him 3 mountains for free. Secondly, since Master Wan wanted to establish a sect, it would be best if the 3 mountains were connected together and adjacent to each other. Otherwise, it would not be appropriate to have one on the east and one on the west. This was probably where the imperial court was smart. They knew that Master Wan would not pick the 3 most valuable mountains, so they pretended to be very generous. In the end, Chen Pinggan naturally had to follow Master Wan to choose a mountain. Of course, Chen Pinggan felt that he could choose 1 or 2 smaller mountains elsewhere. For example, Zhenju Mountain would be very suitable. A small mountain that no one cared about, but Chen Pinggan especially cared about it. No matter how small a mountain was, it was still a whole mountain. Moreover, it was only 1 copper coin. Chen Pinggan felt that he had to take this small mountain into his pocket. It was not that Chen Pinggan was not interested in the most expensive mountains that Master Wan had mentioned, the Dry Spring Mountain, Shenxiu Mountain, and Fragrant Volcano. He would strive to buy a big mountain that was not as good as them, but not by much. He estimated that he would spend at most a bag of gold fine copper coins, then buy some small mountains similar to Zhenju Mountain, and try to spend about 10 copper coins. The rest would be used to bet with Master Wan. After he picked the 3 mountains, Chen Pinggan would buy them nearby, and buy again, and buy with all his might. As for the unknown mountain that had the dragon beheading platform, Chen Pinggan had completely given up. He warned himself that he must not touch it. Even if no one knew about it, Chen Pinggan would not buy such a great opportunity in front of him. Now, there were guests coming from all over the town. It was no longer the small cave that was sealed off to the outside world. Even Chen Pinggan could walk down the hundreds of miles of mountain roads. In the future, who would be able to stop the footsteps of, let alone those immortals flying around on long swords in the sky? However, before he paid for the mountain, Chen Pinggan planned to personally go into the mountain again. Chen Pinggan would feel uncomfortable spending so much money without knowing what he had bought beforehand. Even if he knew that it was a profitable business with little capital. This was actually because he was used to hardships. Chen Pinggan now had 8 snake gall stones that had not faded at all. The rest of the snake gall stones were hidden in his house and Liu Xianyang's house. There were many of them. He did not know if it was because he had escaped from the stream early on. Although the color and gloss had faded to different degrees and they did not look as bright and comfortable as when they came out of the water, they more or less still had some spiritual energy. This kind of inexplicable feeling was like the first time Chen Pinggan saw Ji Yu Ken in Clay Bottle Alley or Li Baoping in Fulu Street. He felt that they must be smart and clever children. Chen Pinggan put away the 3 bags of gold fine copper coins and put them back into the clay pot. Chen Pinggan had a headache when he thought about asking Master Wan for leave to enter the mountain again. Old Man Yarrow was like this, and so was Master Wan. Chen Pinggan suspected that he did not have any affinity with elders, especially with masters. Chen Pinggan went to the corner and squatted beside the basket. He stared at the beheading dragon platform inside and reached out to touch the delicate texture of the black stone. It was slightly cold to the touch. He was very curious about how such an inconspicuous stone could be related to Miss Ning, who was an immortal who stepped on a sword. He could not imagine how sharp a sword could be made by the beheading dragon platform. Chen Pinggan suddenly remembered something and took out the 5 locust tree leaves. The red cotton-padded jacket girl had picked up 8 leaves from the old locust tree. Chen Pinggan had given her 3 leaves as a reward. Chen Pinggan carefully looked at the locust tree leaves. They looked thin but were actually quite tough. It was a pity that they had lost the green luster that flowed along the veins of the leaves. Chen Pinggan guessed that it was probably the so-called ancestral blessing. Only at some nodes, there would be a little bit of green luster remaining. Chen Pinggan carefully placed the 5 locust tree leaves into the mountain shaking fist manual. After Chen Pinggan finished, he went out and began to practice the stances in the yard. The neighbors on the left and right had moved away one after another. Chen Pinggan quickly immersed himself in the stance, completely forgetting himself. His fist intent flowed like a stream. Miss Ning Yarrow had said that practicing 1,000,000 times was only the beginning of martial arts. Chen Pinggan was not willing to be lazy. He inadvertently thought of the red ink characters on the wooden figurine and the legendary Qi palace that allowed air to flow in and out. His entire body felt comfortable and hot. It was as if there was a fire dragon swimming quickly in his body, going down from head to toe. The process was bumpy and not smooth at all. Those aperture acupoints were like dilapidated and rough passes. The paths between the passes were definitely not the great path of the sun. Some were wide but uneven, some were narrow and steep. When the fire dragon passed by, it swayed like a pedestrian crossing an iron chain bridge. Finally, the fire dragon shuttled back and forth between the several Qi palaces near his lower dantian, as if it was searching for the most suitable place for it to occupy as the Dragon Palace. Ning Yarrow had once said that there were 3 realms in the martial way. The first realm was the clay embryo realm. When one reached the peak of perfection, they would produce qi. Like a clay bodhisattva sitting high up in a shrine, the qi would sink into the dantian, motionless like a mountain. The body would then have a new atmosphere, beginning to nourish the flesh and bones. It would cause the entire person to be like a withered tree in spring. Chen Pinggan was walking on this path. Without the guidance of a famous teacher, it could not be considered a fluke. He had relied on hard work to make up for his lack of talent. For 8 years, he had climbed mountains and crossed rivers. Although it was crude, he had obtained a type of breathing technique. In 8 years, he had not broken through the first realm of the martial way. In the secular dynasties and the Jianghu, apart from Ning Yarrow's hometown, there was a difference between the poor and the rich and the martial way. Fortunately, in the martial way, there was no bad habit of comparing the speed of ascending realms. The more one entered the martial way, the more profound the martial master was, the more they looked at the weight of each step, the more solid each step of the martial way was. But for someone as slow as Chen Pinggan, it could not be considered a disgrace. After all, there were countless young people from powerful families that were blocked at the first threshold. In their entire lives, they could not find the existence of that qi. But from the current situation, Chen Pinggan definitely could not be considered a martial arts genius. Chen Pinggan abruptly woke up, lightly exhaling a breath of turbid qi. He slowly walked in the courtyard, gradually relaxing his 4 limbs. Chen Pingan lowered his head and looked at the locust tree branch at the foot of the wall. He suddenly had a whimsical idea. He wanted to carve a wooden sword for himself. When he was young, after his parents left, Chen Pingan would always watch his peers play from afar at the immortal's tomb. Most of the girls would fly kites, while the boys would use the wooden and bamboo swords their fathers helped to make. They would have a lot of fun. Chen Pingan had always wanted one at that time. But later, he became an apprentice in the porcelain kiln. He was exhausted from running around all year round, so he gave up the idea. Chen Pingan squatted in front of the locust tree branch. He felt that it would be no problem to make a wooden sword, but it would be more difficult to make two. Chen Pingan first moved the locust tree branch outside the house, then took the hatchet used to carve a path into the mountain. He was ready to make a wooden sword for himself. However, when Chen Pingan sat on the threshold with the hatchet, he was a little hesitant. After thinking about it, he put the hatchet back. He felt that the locust tree should not be regarded as just an old tree. After all, Mr. Chi and the locust tree had a conversation. Therefore, the locust tree branch in front of him made Chen Pingan feel a little awkward. Chen Pingan put the locust tree branch back at the foot of the wall again. He found that he really did not feel sleepy, so he left the courtyard. After locking the door, he walked all the way out of the mud bottle lane. He unexpectedly came to the stone arch bridge. Thinking that he could not always jump over the river in the future, he gritted his teeth and walked onto the stone bridge. He sat on the stone slab in the middle again, his feet hanging over the stream. Chen Pingan was a little nervous. He looked down at the quiet water and murmured, "Whether you are an immortal or a monster, we should have no grudge against each other. If you really have something to tell me, don't tell me in my dreams. I am here now, you can just tell me. 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours." Except for a little cold, Chen Pingan did not feel anything strange. Chen Pingan put his hands on the stone slab, shook his feet, and looked into the distance. When he was very young, he was very curious about where the stream ended. Chen Pingan was in a daze. Liu Xianyang, Jiyu Kan, Miss Ning, Mr. Chi, and Old Man Yarrow were all gone. Chen Pingan had never been so rich. But the teenager had never been so lonely. On the other side of the stone bridge where the teenager with straw sandals had his back, there was a tall figure in snow-white clothes. He looked like an immortal and a ghost. He also put his hands on the stone slab, shook his feet in the air, and looked up at the sky. However, even Old Yang and Wan Tan did not notice this scene, let alone Chen Pingan, who had started talking to himself. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.